No one had entered the black dungeon and returned alive, not because of the chained beast that tore steel apart with its claws, but because another prisoner shared the same cage, a prisoner the kingdom believed had died months ago. When every warrior failed to calm the wounded beast, the guards forced the lowest-ranked Omega into the darkness, expecting her to become its next victim. Instead, she began to sing. The beast slowly lowered its head. The chains stopped shaking. Then, from the deepest shadow inside the cage, another pair of golden eyes opened. Scarred, unbroken, watching her. In that moment, the Omega realized the greatest lie in the kingdom. The Alpha King had never died. He had been imprisoned beneath his own throne all along. No one spoke the name of the Black Dungeon after sunset. Even the bravest warriors lowered their voices whenever its heavy stone gates came into view. The air around the ancient fortress felt colder than winter itself. Every wall carried silent memories of blood and broken loyalty. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret that refused to die. Deep beneath the palace, where kings had ruled for generations, something far more terrifying than death waited in complete darkness. It was not simply a prison. It was a place built to erase names from history. Those who entered were never remembered again. Every night, the same sound echoed through the underground halls. Thick chains crashed against stone. A wounded beast roared with enough fury to shake the walls above. Guards who had faced countless battles stepped backward each time those cries filled the corridors. None dared to look directly toward the iron cage hidden at the end of the dungeon. They believed only madness lived there. They believed nothing human remained inside. For many months, the beast refused food. It attacked every hand that reached through the bars. Several soldiers left with deep wounds across their arms while others never walked out again. Rumors spread through every corner of the kingdom. Some whispered that the creature had been cursed by the moon goddess herself. Others claimed it had once served the greatest Alpha King in history, before losing its mind during a forgotten war. No one knew the truth, because anyone who came close enough to learn it disappeared forever. Far above the dungeon, the palace celebrated another peaceful morning. Noble families laughed inside bright halls filled with warm firelight. Servants hurried across polished floors carrying silver trays and expensive wine. Music drifted through open windows while banners bearing the symbol of the new rulers danced proudly in the wind. To everyone living above it seemed like a kingdom blessed with peace. Yet beneath those shining halls, suffering refused to end. Every cheerful sound from above became another reminder that darkness had been buried beneath beauty. Among the servants moved a young Omega named Alara. She carried no family name worth remembering. No noble blood flowed through her veins. Her clothes were simple and worn from years of hard work. Most people never looked directly at her. To them, she was another invisible worker whose only purpose was obeying orders without asking questions. She accepted every insult with quiet patience because survival demanded silence. Still, there remained something inside her that years of hardship had never managed to destroy. Her heart continued searching for kindness, even in places where kindness no longer existed. The older servants often warned her never to wander near the western corridor after sunset. They claimed strange sounds escaped from beneath the stone floors. They said those sounds belonged to restless spirits who punished anyone foolish enough to listen. Alara never believed the stories completely. What troubled her most was not the frightening tales, but the fear she saw in the eyes of those telling them. It was the kind of fear born from witnessing something real. That evening, dark clouds covered. The sky before the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Strong winds swept across the fortress, carrying the smell of approaching rain. Torches flickered along the castle walls as guards hurried to their assigned posts. Suddenly, another roar burst from beneath the palace, louder than ever before, stronger than thunder itself. Plates crashed onto marble floors. Horses screamed inside the royal stables. Even experienced warriors reached for their weapons without thinking. The captain of the royal guards stood frozen for only a moment before shouting orders across the courtyard. His face had lost every trace of confidence. Another guard stumbled out of the western staircase, breathing heavily with terror written across every feature. "The beast has stopped eating again," he whispered. "The chains will not hold much longer." Silence spread across the hall. No one volunteered to go below. Every warrior stared at the floor, hoping another name would be called instead of their own. Finally, the captain spoke with quiet anger. "Bring the Omega." Several heads turned in confusion. One soldier frowned. "She will never survive." The captain answered without hesitation, "Then nothing valuable will be lost." Within minutes, frightened footsteps echoed through the servant quarters. Alara looked up from her work as armed guards surrounded her without explanation. She searched their faces for answers, but found only cold determination. No one offered comfort. No one explained why she had been chosen. One guard simply ordered her to follow. She obeyed because refusing armed soldiers was impossible. The journey toward the western corridor felt longer than any road she had ever walked. Each staircase carried them deeper beneath the palace. Warm air slowly disappeared. Moisture covered the stone walls. Every torch burned weaker than the last until only faint orange light remained. Strange claw marks covered ancient doors that had not been opened in years. The deeper they descended, the heavier the silence became. Then she heard it. A slow, painful growl, not filled with rage, filled with suffering. It echoed through the endless darkness like the cry of a wounded soul begging for release. Alara stopped walking. Something inside her chest tightened. That was not the sound of a monster hungry for blood. It was the sound of someone who had forgotten what hope felt like. The guards pushed her forward without mercy. One final iron gate opened with a long, grinding noise that echoed across the underground halls. Cold air rushed toward her face. The smell of old stone, wet earth, and iron filled every breath. Far ahead, beyond rows of thick prison bars, two golden eyes slowly appeared inside complete darkness. The guards stepped backward. Alara remained standing. She had never felt fear like this before. Yet for reasons she could not explain, she could not bring herself to run. And hidden beyond those glowing eyes, another silent figure remained completely still, waiting in the darkness for the first spark of hope it had seen in many endless months. The golden eyes never moved away from Alara. They glowed through the darkness like two silent flames that had refused to die. Every guard remained behind the heavy iron gate. None of them dared to take another step. Their hands gripped their weapons with shaking fingers while their breathing became louder than the dripping water that echoed through the ancient dungeon. They had seen those eyes before, and every memory they carried ended with blood covering the cold stone floor. The captain forced courage into his voice and looked toward Alara. His expression held no kindness and no regret. It carried only the certainty that she would never return. He told her to go inside and calm the beast before sunrise. If she failed, then no one would come for her. His words fell into the darkness like pieces of ice. Before Alara could answer, the iron gate behind her slammed shut with a thunderous sound that rolled through every tunnel beneath the palace. She was alone. For several long moments, nothing happened. The dungeon became so quiet that she could hear every slow drop of water falling from the ceiling. Dust floated through thin streams of torchlight. Broken chains lay scattered across the floor like the remains of forgotten battles. Deep claw marks covered the walls, proving that incredible strength had once been unleashed inside this prison. Yet none of those things frightened Alara as much as the silence that now surrounded the beast. She slowly lifted the small lantern she carried. Its weak light pushed back only a little of the endless darkness. As the glow reached farther into the cage, she finally saw the massive white wolf lying against the stone wall. Thick silver fur covered a body marked by countless scars. Heavy, chains wrapped around its legs and neck until the iron had cut deep into its flesh. Fresh wounds remained open across its shoulders where cruel punishment had been repeated again and again. The mighty creature looked exhausted, yet even in weakness it carried the presence of something born to protect kings rather than obey them. The wolf raised its head only slightly. It did not growl. It simply watched her. Pain filled its eyes more than anger ever could. Alara felt something break inside her heart. She had expected to meet a monster. Instead, she found a living soul, abandoned by everyone who once depended upon its strength. She took one careful step forward, then another. The chains moved softly across the stone floor, but the wolf did not attack. Outside the cage, frightened guards pressed closer together. One whispered that she would be dead within moments. Another closed his eyes because he could not bear to watch what was about to happen. They had seen brave warriors torn apart inside that same prison. An untrained Omega stood no chance. Yet minute after minute passed and nothing changed. Alara lowered herself onto one knee a safe distance from the wounded animal. She noticed dried blood beneath its body. She noticed how each breath seemed heavier than the last. The creature was not preparing to hunt. It was fighting simply to remain alive. Tears gathered quietly in her eyes. No living being deserved such suffering. Without thinking, she began to hum the same gentle melody her mother had once sung during long winter nights. It was an old song almost forgotten by the kingdom, soft and slow like warm light rising after endless darkness. Her voice carried through the dungeon with quiet strength. Every note floated across the cold air and settled gently. Around the wounded wolf, the impossible happened. The animal slowly closed its eyes. Its breathing became calmer. The trembling chains grew still. The anger that had terrified the entire kingdom disappeared beneath the warmth of one forgotten lullaby. The guards stared through the bars, unable to understand what they were witnessing. Their faces turned pale. Some stepped backward as though kindness itself had become something dangerous. Alara continued singing. She no longer noticed the guards. She no longer noticed the darkness surrounding her. Her attention remained fixed upon the wounded creature before her. She believed she had finally reached the lonely heart of a broken beast. Then she heard another sound, not a growl, not the movement of chains around the wolf. A slow human breath emerged from somewhere deeper, inside the cage. Her song stopped. Silence rushed back into the dungeon. She slowly lifted the lantern higher and allowed its trembling light to reach beyond the white wolf. At first she saw nothing except darkness. Then the light touched another chain fixed high against the stone wall. It followed the chain downward until it disappeared into the shadows. Someone was sitting there, perfectly still, almost invisible. The figure looked more like part of the prison than a living man. Long dark hair covered most of his face. Heavy iron restraints bound both wrists above his head. Deep scars crossed powerful shoulders that had once carried armor instead of chains. His clothes had become little more than torn pieces of cloth. Yet even after months of starvation, his posture refused to bend completely. Something about him remained impossible to break. Slowly his head lifted. The lantern light reached his face. Golden eyes opened. Not the eyes of a prisoner, not the eyes of a defeated man, the eyes of someone who had commanded entire armies with a single glance. The royal crest burned into one broken iron shackle, caught the edge of the lantern light. It had been damaged on purpose, as though someone wanted to erase every sign of the man who once wore it with pride. Alara forgot to breathe. Every story she had heard since childhood returned at once. Stories of a fearless alpha king who had vanished without a trace. Stories claiming he died defending the kingdom from distant enemies. Stories that had turned into legends whispered only by the oldest servants. Those stories had all been lies. The true alpha king had never fallen on a battlefield. He had been hidden beneath his own palace while traitors ruled above his throne. For the first time in countless months, the chained king looked directly into another human face without hatred. He studied the frightened Omega in complete silence while the white wolf rested peacefully beside her as though waiting for his command. Above them, the palace celebrated another peaceful night without knowing that deep beneath its foundations, destiny had quietly awakened, and in that frozen moment neither Ilara nor the imprisoned, Alpha King realized that one simple song had begun a chain of events powerful enough to bring an entire kingdom to its knees. The silence inside the dungeon no longer felt empty. It felt alive. It watched every breath that passed between the frightened Omega and the forgotten king. The white wolf remained lying beside Ilara with its head resting quietly against the cold stone. The rage that had terrified the palace for months had vanished beneath the warmth of one simple song. Yet the greatest miracle was not the beast. It was the man sitting behind it. The chained Alpha King had not spoken a single word. Even so, his presence filled the darkness with a quiet power that refused to disappear. His enemies had stolen his throne. They had stolen his name. They had stolen every symbol of his rule, yet they had failed to steal the one thing that made him dangerous. His spirit still stood taller than the chains wrapped around his body. Ilara slowly lowered the lantern until its soft light reached the floor between them. She could finally see the deep wounds covering the Alpha King's wrists where thick iron had cut into his skin again and again. Every scar carried the memory of another attempt to break him. Every mark told a story of endless suffering hidden beneath the palace, while the kingdom celebrated a lie above his head. She had grown up believing the Alpha King had died protecting his people. Now the truth stood before her covered in chains and silence. Her heart struggled to accept what her eyes refused to deny. The Alpha King watched her carefully. Months of betrayal had taught him never to trust another face. Too many smiles had hidden poisoned intentions. Too many promises had ended in blood. Yet this young Omega carried no fear inside her eyes. She carried sorrow. It confused him more than any weapon ever could. No servant had looked at him with compassion since the day his prison became his world. He searched her expression for deception, but found only honesty. The white wolf slowly lifted its wounded head and moved closer to the Alpha King. Despite its injuries, it gently rested against his chained leg. The movement spoke louder than words. This beast had not lost its loyalty. It had simply refused to live without its king. Ilara understood that truth without anyone explaining it. Tears quietly filled her eyes as she realized both prisoners had been punished for the same betrayal. Outside the cage, the guards whispered among themselves. None dared enter. They watched the impossible unfold before their eyes. The captain frowned as uncertainty replaced confidence. The Omega should have been dead long ago. Instead, the beast had become peaceful, and the mysterious prisoner hidden inside the darkness had shown no sign of violence. Something felt terribly wrong. The captain ordered 2 guards to remain while the others hurried upstairs to report everything to the palace council. Their footsteps faded into the distance. The Alpha King closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had waited many months for news from above. The frightened reaction of the guards told him something had changed. Fear was spreading among the people who believed he would never be seen again. That fear was the first crack inside the prison built around his forgotten name. Ilara carefully reached into the small cloth bag hanging from her shoulder. She removed a piece of fresh bread that she had saved from her evening meal. Without speaking, she placed it near the wolf. The great animal sniffed it for only a moment before gently eating. There was no anger, no desperation, only quiet hunger after countless days without hope. Then Ilara looked toward the Alpha King. She hesitated. The guards had brought no food for him, not even water. Only then did she fully understand the cruelty hidden beneath the palace. The kingdom had not planned to keep its former ruler alive forever. They intended to let time finish what betrayal had begun. She slowly walked toward him until only a few steps separated them. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear every beat inside her chest. The Alpha King remained still. His golden eyes never left her face. "You have not eaten, have you?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Alpha King answered after a long silence. "Not today, not yesterday, perhaps. Not for many days." His voice sounded rough from months without conversation, yet it carried calm authority that no prison could erase. Ilara felt tears threaten to fall again. She broke the remaining bread into 2 pieces, and carefully reached through the heavy chains that separated them. "Please take this. It is not much, but it belongs to you now." For several seconds, the Alpha King did not move. No one had offered him food without expecting something in return since the night he was betrayed. Finally, he accepted the bread with slow, careful hands. Not because he hungered for food, because he realized kindness still existed somewhere beyond these walls. As he ate the first small piece, memories returned with painful clarity. He remembered standing before thousands of loyal warriors beneath bright skies. He remembered children laughing freely inside peaceful villages. He remembered believing those closest to him would remain loyal until death. Every memory now felt like another wound reopening inside his soul. Alara noticed the pain hidden behind his calm expression. She wanted to ask countless questions. She wanted to know who had done this. She wanted to know why an entire kingdom believed such a terrible lie. But before she could speak, another sound echoed through the corridor. Fast footsteps. Many of them. The guards had returned, only this time they were not alone. Several richly dressed council members descended into the dungeon carrying expensive lanterns. Their faces remained hidden beneath dark cloaks, yet their movements revealed confidence born from power. The moment they saw the Alpha King sitting awake, their expressions changed. Surprise flashed across every face before disappearing beneath carefully controlled smiles. One elderly council member stepped forward. "So the forgotten king still breathes." Another looked toward Alara with cold eyes. "It seems the little Omega has become a problem." The Alpha King slowly lifted his head. Months of weakness remained inside his body. Yet the look in his eyes forced every man standing outside the cage to stop walking. For one brief moment, the dungeon no longer belonged to the council. It belonged to the king they had failed to destroy. And somewhere deep inside the palace walls, hidden ears listened as the first whispers spread through the fortress. The prisoner beneath the throne was no ordinary captive. The true Alpha King was still alive. The dungeon grew colder the moment the council members stepped into the narrow corridor. Their polished boots echoed across the ancient stone while their expensive cloaks brushed against the damp walls that had hidden the greatest secret in the kingdom for months. None of them looked surprised for long. They had expected the Alpha King to die slowly beneath the palace. They had never imagined that one forgotten Omega would awaken the strength they had spent so long trying to bury. Yet powerful men rarely admitted fear. They covered it with smiles that never reached their eyes. The eldest council member walked closer until only the iron bars separated him from the prison. His face carried the confidence of someone who believed history belonged to those who survived rather than those who deserved to rule. He studied the Alpha King for several long moments before speaking in a calm voice. "You should have died long ago," the Alpha King answered without lowering his eyes. "You have repeated that wish every day. Yet I remain." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of authority that no chain could silence. Even the guards standing behind the council exchanged nervous glances. They had never heard a prisoner speak with such calm certainty. It was as though the throne still belonged to the man standing inside the cage rather than the traitors above it. The council member turned his attention toward Alara. His expression hardened. "You have crossed a line that servants are never meant to cross." She lowered her head but refused to step away from the wounded wolf. Her fear remained real, but something stronger had begun growing inside her heart. She had witnessed too much to pretend ignorance. She knew now that the kingdom rested upon a terrible lie. "I only offered food to those who were starving." Her voice trembled, but her words remained honest. The council members laughed softly. One younger, noble stepped forward with cruel amusement shining across his face. "Kindness has no place beneath this palace. Mercy is what destroyed the old king." The Alpha King slowly rose to his feet. His body remained weak from months without proper food, yet every movement forced silence across the dungeon. The chains stretched tightly against his wrists, but his back remained straight. He looked less like a prisoner and more like a ruler standing before those who had stolen everything from him. The white wolf also stood. Its wounds still covered its body, but it placed itself between Alara and the council without hesitation. Low growls rolled through the corridor, not wild, not uncontrolled, protective. The guards instinctively stepped backward. The eldest council member noticed the change immediately. He understood what the others had failed to see. The beast was no longer protecting only its king. It had accepted the Omega as part of its circle. That frightened him more than claws or teeth ever could. Without another word, he motioned for the guards to leave. The heavy gates closed once again. Only one torch remained burning outside the prison. Darkness returned. Yet something had changed forever. For the first time since his capture, the Alpha King had looked directly into the faces of those who betrayed him. He had seen fear, small, hidden, but real. After the footsteps disappeared, Alara finally looked toward him. Why did they do this? The Alpha King remained silent for several moments. His eyes drifted toward the ceiling where faint sounds from the palace echoed through layers of stone. Because power attracts loyalty until fear becomes stronger than honor. Some believed the kingdom would follow them more easily if I disappeared forever. They poisoned trust before they poisoned me. Alara listened carefully. Every word sounded less like anger and more like painful truth. She realized the Alpha King did not hate because hatred consumed strength. He remembered. That memory was far more dangerous. She slowly walked closer. There must be someone who still believes in you. The Alpha King looked toward the broken royal crest resting against the wall. There were many. Some died protecting me. Some vanished. Others were forced into silence, but loyalty never disappears completely. It waits. His final word lingered inside the cold air. It waits. The sentence remained inside Alara's heart long after he stopped speaking. Hope had survived beneath these chains longer than anyone above the palace could imagine. She reached toward the wolf and gently cleaned one of its wounds with a strip of cloth torn from her own sleeve. The great animal remained perfectly still. Every careful touch strengthened the invisible bond forming between them. The Alpha King watched quietly. He had spent months believing the world had forgotten compassion. Now each passing moment challenged that belief. Far above them, another meeting had already begun inside the royal council chamber. Torches burned brightly around a long stone table where the false rulers gathered in growing panic. Reports spread from guard to guard until every noble heard the same unbelievable story. The beast had become calm. The hidden prisoner was alive. The Omega had entered the cage without dying. No one laughed. No one dismissed the reports. One powerful lord slowly stood and looked across the chamber. If word escapes these walls, our rule ends. The order was given immediately. The dungeon would remain sealed. Every servant who knew the truth would disappear, and the Omega would never be allowed to leave alive. Back beneath the palace, Alara knew nothing of the decision made above her. She prepared to leave before the guards returned at dawn. As she picked up her lantern, the Alpha King spoke again. His voice stopped her before she reached the gate. "Why did you sing?" She looked back. "Because someone once sang for me when I believed the world had forgotten me. I thought perhaps your wolf needed to remember that feeling too." The Alpha King closed his eyes. Not from weakness, from memory. It had been many years since anyone had spoken to him without fear or ambition. When he opened his eyes again, something inside them had changed. The endless emptiness was gone. In its place burned the first quiet spark of determination. He watched Alara disappear through the iron gate as the guards finally returned to escort her away. Neither of them noticed a small object lying beneath the straw where the wolf had rested. A rusted piece of broken chain. The Alpha King slowly bent down and picked it up. Hidden inside the cracked iron was a tiny carved symbol. the mark of his oldest royal guard, a sign known only to those who had sworn loyalty until death. Someone had reached the dungeon before. Someone inside the palace was still working in secret. Someone wanted their true king to survive. The Alpha King closed his hand around the hidden message. For months he had lived only to endure another day. Now he finally had something greater. Proof. Proof that the kingdom had not completely abandoned him, and somewhere beyond the dungeon walls, the first loyal heart had already begun preparing for the return of the true Alpha King. Morning arrived above the palace with golden sunlight, pouring across polished towers while far below the dungeon remained buried beneath endless darkness. The kingdom awakened believing another peaceful day had begun. Merchants opened their shops. Children laughed through narrow streets. Soldiers changed their posts upon the castle walls. Every ordinary moment depended upon a single lie that had survived for many months. None of them knew that the foundation beneath their feet had already begun to crack. Hope had returned to the forgotten king, and hope was far more dangerous than any army. The Alpha King remained awake long after Alara had been taken back to the servant quarters. Sleep no longer visited him easily. Too many nights had been filled with betrayal and silence. Yet this night had been different. For the first time since the chains had closed around his wrists, he no longer counted the days until death. He counted, the possibilities still waiting beyond the prison walls. His hand remained wrapped around the broken piece of iron hidden beneath the straw. The small carved mark upon its surface could not have appeared by accident. It belonged to the Royal Shadow Guard, an ancient order that answered only to the Alpha King himself. Every member had sworn an oath before the moon goddess that loyalty would remain stronger than fear. Most people believed the order had been destroyed on the night of the betrayal. Yet someone had reached this dungeon. Someone had risked everything simply to leave behind one silent message. The Alpha King carefully examined every scratch upon the broken chain. His sharp eyes noticed another small carving hidden beneath years of rust. It was not a name. It was not a sentence. It was a single moon-shaped symbol pointing toward the northern wall of the prison. At first glance, it seemed meaningless. Then memory slowly returned. Many years earlier, while expanding the palace, the royal builders had created secret escape passages known only to the king and his most trusted guards. Those hidden paths had never appeared upon official maps. Even members of the royal council had never learned where they began. The realization sent fresh strength through his tired body. If one loyal guard had discovered the old passage, then others might still be alive. The prison was no longer just a cage. It had become the beginning of a path leading back toward freedom. The white wolf slowly stood beside him and gently nudged his arm. The great creature seemed to sense the change inside its king. Its golden eyes burned brighter than they had in many months. Though hunger had weakened its body, its spirit had awakened once again. The Alpha King rested one hand against the thick silver fur. "We are not finished." His quiet voice carried certainty instead of desperation. Not yet. Far above the dungeon, Alara struggled to focus on her morning duties. Every hallway reminded her of the truth hidden beneath the palace. Every noble she passed now appeared different. Behind expensive clothes and polite smiles, she no longer saw respected leaders. She saw people capable of imprisoning their own king while forcing an entire kingdom to mourn a false death. The older servants quickly noticed her silence. One elderly woman gently touched her shoulder. "Child, what troubles your heart?" Alara hesitated. She wanted to speak. She wanted to tell someone the truth. But she remembered the cold eyes of the council members. She remembered the warning hidden inside their smiles. Instead, she forced a quiet answer. "I did not sleep well." The old servant looked at her carefully. Then she leaned closer until only Alara could hear. "Be careful who you trust inside these walls. Some ears belong to people who sold their honor long ago." Without another word, the woman continued her work. Alara remained frozen. those simple words carried more meaning than they seemed. Perhaps she was not the only person who doubted the stories told by the council. Perhaps the kingdom still held hearts waiting for the truth. Late that afternoon, the captain of the guards appeared once again. His heavy footsteps echoed across the servant hall before he stopped directly before Alara. "Bring fresh bandages, fresh water, and enough food for 2 prisoners." His voice sounded harder than before. Alara quietly nodded, though surprise filled her heart. The council had decided to keep the Alpha King alive, at least for now. She gathered everything requested and followed the guards back toward the western corridor. This time the journey felt different. Fear still walked beside her, but curiosity had become stronger. She carried more than food and water. She carried the only kindness those prisoners would receive. When the heavy gates opened, the white wolf immediately lifted its head. Instead of growling, it quietly approached the bars. Its tail moved once across the stone floor before becoming still again. Even the guards noticed the remarkable change. The beast remembered her. The Alpha King stepped forward from the shadows. Though his body remained thin, his posture had changed. His shoulders stood straighter. His eyes carried purpose instead of emptiness. Alara noticed the difference immediately, though she could not explain it. "You look stronger today." The Alpha King allowed the smallest hint of a smile to appear. "Strength returns faster when hope returns first." The words settled deeply inside Alara's heart. She carefully cleaned the wounds upon the white wolf while speaking softly to calm the animal. Then she turned toward the Alpha King. Fresh bandages lay folded inside her basket. "May I help?" He looked down at the deep cuts around his wrists. After a long silence, he slowly extended his hands through the chains. Alara gently wrapped clean cloth around the broken skin. Her movements remained careful and patient. Every touch reminded the Alpha King of days before betrayal, when healers moved through the royal camp after battle. No servant had treated him with such dignity since his imprisonment. As she finished tying the final bandage, something caught her attention. The northern wall. One small stone looked cleaner than the others, almost as though someone had touched it recently. She frowned without speaking. The Alpha King followed her gaze. Their eyes met for only a moment. Neither of them spoke. Neither needed to. Both understood they had noticed the same thing. Outside the cage, one young guard watched everything in complete silence. Unlike the others, he showed no hatred toward the prisoners. Instead, uncertainty filled his face. He had joined the royal guard only after hearing stories about the legendary Alpha King who protected every village during harsh winters. Standing before the chained prisoner, he struggled to believe that such a man could truly be a traitor. As Alara prepared to leave, the young guard quietly slipped something into her basket while the others looked away. She did not notice. The Alpha King did. His sharp eyes followed every movement. The young guard lowered his head before stepping back into formation. When Alara finally returned to the servant quarters, she emptied her basket beside the kitchen fire. A folded piece of rough cloth fell onto the table. Hidden inside it rested a small silver ring engraved with the same moon-shaped symbol carved into the broken chain beneath the dungeon straw. Someone else had just revealed themselves. The circle of loyal hearts was growing, and somewhere inside the palace, hidden beneath layers of fear, the first pieces of a forgotten alliance had quietly begun finding one another again. The small silver ring remained hidden inside Alara's hand long after the evening bells echoed across the palace. She locked the door of her tiny servant room and held the ring beneath the weak flame of a single candle. The moon-shaped mark carved into its surface matched the symbol hidden inside the broken chain beneath the dungeon. There could be no mistake. 2 different people had left the same secret sign. The Alpha King had not been forgotten. His loyal followers were still breathing somewhere inside the kingdom. They had remained silent for months, not because they had surrendered, but because they had been waiting for the right moment to move. A soft knock broke the silence. Alara quickly hid the ring beneath a loose floorboard before opening the door. The elderly servant stood outside holding a basket filled with fresh herbs. Her gentle eyes searched the hallway before she quietly stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Without saying a word, she placed one small cloth pouch on the table. Inside rested healing leaves rarely found inside the palace. Ilara looked at her with confusion. The old woman smiled faintly. Some wounds should never be allowed to become deeper. Take them tomorrow. Ask no questions. Then she quietly walked away. Ilara watched the door for several moments after the woman disappeared. Another person, another quiet act of loyalty. The invisible circle surrounding the forgotten king continued growing one heart at a time. Deep beneath the palace, the Alpha King carefully examined the northern wall after darkness covered the kingdom once again. The white wolf remained close beside him while the dungeon guards changed shifts outside the prison. He counted every step they took, every pause, every conversation. Months of captivity had sharpened his mind until every small detail became valuable. A ruler who once commanded thousands now survived by observing shadows. When the corridor finally became silent, he pressed one hand against the cleaner stone Ilara had noticed earlier. Nothing happened. He slowly pushed harder. Still, nothing. Then he remembered something from many years before. The hidden passages had never opened through strength. They opened through balance. He shifted his weight slightly and pressed the stone from another angle. A quiet click echoed beneath the wall. His heart remained calm, but his eyes brightened. The stone moved no wider than the width of a finger before stopping against heavy iron bars built behind it. The passage still existed, but someone had sealed it with new chains after the betrayal. The Alpha King stepped back. His escape would not come tonight. Yet he had learned something even more important. His enemies feared those old tunnels enough to block them. That meant they believed someone might still try to rescue him. Far above, the dungeon, another meeting filled the royal council chamber with growing tension. Maps covered the long stone table while nervous voices echoed beneath the high ceiling. Reports continued arriving from every corner of the kingdom. Villages once completely loyal to the new rulers had begun asking strange questions. Travelers whispered that the old king's loyal wolf had been heard howling beneath the palace. Merchants claimed certain royal guards secretly wore the ancient moon symbol beneath their armor. No rebellion had begun yet, but belief had started changing. One council member slammed his hand against the table. Find whoever spreads these stories, burn every rumor before it becomes hope. The oldest lord remained silent for a long time before speaking. Hope cannot be burned, only the people carrying it. His cold answer filled the room with deadly purpose. Orders spread through the palace before midnight. Every servant would be questioned. Every guard would be watched. Every hidden corner would be searched. The hunt had begun. The following morning, Ilara returned to the dungeon carrying food, fresh water, and the healing herbs hidden beneath folded cloth. She noticed something had changed before reaching the prison. Extra guards lined the corridors. New locks covered every iron gate. Even the air felt heavier, as though the palace itself had become suspicious of its own people. The captain stopped her before opening the final gate. "You will leave everything outside today. You will not go inside." Ilara lowered her eyes. "The beast only eats from my hands." The captain hesitated. He knew she spoke the truth. After several silent moments, he unlocked the gate. "Be quick. No songs today." She quietly entered. The white wolf greeted her with calm eyes, while the Alpha King remained standing near the northern wall. She immediately noticed the faint line running between two large stones. Someone tried to open it. She whispered the words almost without thinking. The Alpha King looked toward her. Someone succeeded in finding it, not opening it. Yet, Ilara carefully handed him the hidden herbs while pretending to adjust the bandages around the wolf's shoulder. The old servant sent these. She knows more than she says. The Alpha King accepted the herbs with quiet gratitude. One loyal heart becomes two. 2 become 4. Soon, silence becomes a voice. Alara smiled for the first time since discovering the truth beneath the palace. The kingdom has not forgotten you. No, he answered softly. It is beginning to remember. Before another word could be spoken, loud footsteps thundered through the corridor. The captain rushed toward the prison with several armed soldiers behind him. His face carried something no one had seen before: fear. He unlocked the outer gate with shaking hands. The council demands every prisoner be moved before sunset. No explanations followed. No reasons were given. The Alpha King immediately understood. His enemies had discovered something, whether it was the hidden tunnel or the growing loyalty inside the palace no longer mattered. They were preparing to erase every trace of the truth before it escaped beyond these walls. The white wolf let out a deep warning growl that rolled through the dungeon like distant thunder. The Alpha King slowly closed his hand around the broken chain hidden beneath the straw. His eyes met Alara's one final time before the guard stepped between them. Neither spoke, neither needed to. Both understood that the next time these prison doors opened, everything would change forever, because the traitors were no longer protecting their stolen throne. They were running from the king they had failed to destroy. The palace had never been so quiet. It was not the peaceful silence of a kingdom at rest. It was the dangerous silence that settled over people who knew a storm was coming, but could not see where it would strike first. Every hallway carried nervous footsteps. Every guard looked over his shoulder before speaking. Every servant lowered their eyes whenever members of the council walked past. Fear had spread beyond the dungeon. It had climbed into the heart of the palace itself. The traitors still sat upon stolen thrones, but for the first time they no longer believed those thrones were safe. Deep beneath the fortress, the Alpha King stood beside the hidden wall, while the white wolf remained alert beside him. The piece of broken chain rested safely inside his hand. It had become more than a message. It had become proof that his kingdom still breathed beyond these prison walls. Every passing hour strengthened his patience instead of weakening it. Long ago, he had learned that a reckless king won battles, but a patient king reclaimed kingdoms. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor once again. This time they did not belong to ordinary guards. The eldest council lord appeared with a dozen armed soldiers surrounding him. Lantern light revealed his pale face and restless eyes. He carried himself like a ruler, yet exhaustion had begun carving deep lines across his expression. Sleepless nights had finally caught up with him. Lies demanded constant protection, and even the strongest liar eventually became a prisoner of his own deception. The old lord stopped before the cage and studied the Alpha King for a long moment. "You still stand," the Alpha King answered calmly. "A true king does not fall because others steal his throne." The words struck harder than any blade. Several guards shifted uneasily. None dared meet the Alpha King's eyes. The council lord forced a smile. "The kingdom has forgotten you. Your name no longer carries power." The Alpha King slowly stepped closer until only the iron bars separated them. "Then why do you fear a man wearing chains?" Silence answered him. No one spoke. Even the torches seemed to burn more quietly. The council lord finally turned away. "Prepare the transport. We move them before nightfall." The soldiers unlocked several heavy gates farther down the corridor and began dragging thick iron wagons toward the prison. Fresh chains clattered across the stone floor. Large wooden cages reinforced with silver bars followed behind them. Everything had been prepared in advance. The council had no intention of allowing the Alpha King to remain beneath the palace any longer. Alara arrived carrying fresh water, only to freeze at the sight before her. More than 30 soldiers now filled the dungeon. Archers lined the upper walkways. Spears surrounded the prison from every direction. She immediately understood the danger. They were not simply moving prisoners. They were preparing for war against 2 captives who had almost no strength left. The young guard who had secretly given her the silver ring quietly moved beside her. "Do not react." His voice remained almost impossible to hear. They suspect someone inside the palace is helping him. Alara kept her expression calm, though her heart raced. Are they taking him away forever? The guard lowered his eyes. No one knows where. That frightened her more than any answer. If the Alpha King disappeared again, every hidden ally inside the palace would lose the only thread connecting them to hope. As soldiers unlocked the first outer gate, the white wolf suddenly rose to its full height. Months of weakness disappeared beneath fierce determination. Deep growls rolled through the corridor. Every soldier instinctively tightened their grip upon shield and spear. The Alpha King gently rested one hand against the wolf's neck. Not yet. The simple command instantly calmed the powerful animal. The guards stared in disbelief. Even after endless suffering, the bond between king and guardian remained unbroken. The eldest council lord noticed something else. The Alpha King had not resisted. He had not begged. He had not shown fear. That confidence unsettled him more than open rebellion. He narrowed his eyes. Search every corner of this prison. Leave nothing untouched. Soldiers rushed inside the cage, overturning, straw-breaking old buckets and striking every wall with heavy hammers. Dust filled the air while echoes rolled through the underground halls. Alara watched helplessly as they moved closer and closer toward the hidden northern wall. The Alpha King remained perfectly still. His calm confused everyone watching. The soldiers finally reached the cleaner stones. One guard struck the wall with the end of his spear. Another pressed against the loose stone. Nothing happened. Again they searched. Again they found nothing. The hidden locking system remained cleverly concealed behind ancient craftsmanship. The Alpha King had discovered its secret. His enemies still had not. The council lord frowned with growing frustration. Move them now. We waste too much time. The soldiers stepped toward the Alpha King carrying fresh chains forged from black steel. Before they reached him, the white wolf released a deafening roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Every torch flickered wildly. Several horses waiting outside the dungeon screamed in panic. The roar echoed through every tunnel beneath the palace. Far above in the royal gardens, birds exploded into the sky. Servants stopped working. Children looked toward the western towers. The sound carried only one message. The guardian of the Alpha King still lived. Within the crowded marketplace, whispers spread almost instantly. The old stories were true. The king's wolf had not died. The rumor traveled from one stranger to another faster than soldiers could silence it. Back inside the dungeon, confusion spread among the guards. Some looked afraid, others looked inspired. One elderly soldier slowly lowered his spear. He remembered standing beside the Alpha King years earlier during the Northern War. He remembered. The ruler who fought beside ordinary warriors instead of hiding behind them. His hands began trembling, the Alpha King noticed. Their eyes met across the prison. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The old soldier's loyalty had awakened, and once a forgotten oath returned to one heart, it rarely stopped there. The council lord immediately recognized the danger. Hope was spreading before his eyes. Not through battle. Not through blood, through memory. He shouted harsh orders to restore discipline, but the certainty inside his own voice had already begun to disappear. Hidden among the frightened soldiers, the young guard quietly touched the moon-shaped symbol concealed beneath his armor. Then, for the first time since the betrayal, he silently bowed his head toward the imprisoned king. The movement lasted only a heartbeat. Almost no one noticed, except the Alpha King. And in that single silent gesture, he realized something greater than freedom had begun. His army was awakening from within the enemy's own walls. The dungeon no longer belonged to the traitors alone. The chains still hung from the walls. The iron gates remained locked. Armed soldiers still surrounded every corner. Yet something invisible had changed. The fear that once lived inside the prisoners had crossed the bars and settled into the hearts of those guarding them. The Alpha King could see it in every uncertain glance. He could hear it in every whispered order. The men who stood outside. The cage carried weapons, but they no longer carried confidence. The council lord refused to accept what was happening before his eyes. He stepped toward the old soldier who had lowered his spear and struck him across the face with the back of his hand. The sharp sound echoed through the dungeon. "Stand straight. Remember who rules this kingdom." The old soldier slowly lifted his head. A fresh mark burned across his cheek. For many years he had obeyed every command without question, but today something inside him refused to kneel. His eyes drifted toward the Alpha King. Then he spoke words that froze every soul in the corridor. "A throne can be stolen. A king cannot." Silence swallowed the dungeon. The council lord stared at him in disbelief, then rage exploded across his face. "Take him away. Chain him beside the prisoner. Let everyone see what loyalty earns." Two soldiers stepped forward. Neither moved. Their hands remained frozen upon their swords. The council lord shouted again, "Move!" Still they remained where they stood. The Alpha King watched without speaking. This was not the moment to fight. This was the moment to let truth awaken by itself. One by one, more guards lowered their weapons. Not in rebellion. Not yet. But because their hearts had begun asking questions their minds could no longer silence. The council lord suddenly realized he was losing something far more valuable than control of one prison. He was losing belief. Without another word, he turned toward the captain. "Remove the Omega first. She is the poison spreading through this place." The captain hesitated only briefly before walking toward Alara. His face remained hard, but his eyes revealed conflict. He had watched her enter the prison again and again. He had seen a wounded beast become calm. He had seen a forgotten king stand taller with every passing day. Even he no longer believed the stories told by the council. Still, he reached for Alara's arm. "Forgive me. I have my orders." Before Alara could answer, the white wolf stepped between them. Its massive body blocked the narrow passage. Its golden eyes remained locked upon the captain. No growl escaped its throat. No attack came. Only a warning. The captain slowly withdrew his hand. He had faced enemy warriors without fear, yet he understood this animal perfectly. Cross one more step, and blood would cover the stones. The Alpha King finally spoke. "She has committed no crime." The council lord laughed coldly. "Compassion itself has become her crime." The Alpha King slowly walked forward until every chain stretched tight behind him. "Then punish me instead. Leave her out of this." The words spread through the corridor like fire carried by dry wind. Every guard heard them. Every servant standing beyond the gates heard them. A king willing to suffer again, so another could remain safe. That was not the ruler described by the council. That was the ruler remembered by the people. The young guard quietly stepped out of formation. His heart pounded so loudly he thought everyone could hear it. He removed his helmet. Then he knelt before the Alpha King. "I swore my oath to the true crown, not to thieves." Gasps echoed throughout the dungeon. Another guard followed, then another. Soon several soldiers stood with lowered heads facing the imprisoned king instead of the council. The council lord staggered backward. His carefully built kingdom had begun falling apart without a single sword being drawn. He pointed toward the kneeling guards. "Arrest them all." No one moved. The order died inside the cold air. The Alpha King remained silent. He did not command them. He did not encourage them. True loyalty never needed to be demanded. It chose its own path. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from somewhere above the dungeon. Another followed. Then the deep ringing of the palace alarm bells filled every corridor. The captain looked toward the staircase. A frightened messenger rushed downward, barely able to breathe. "My lord." The northern gates. Villagers have gathered outside the palace. They demand to know why soldiers keep entering the Black Dungeon. The council lord's face turned completely pale. How could they know? The messenger swallowed hard. Someone has been spreading the truth. People are saying the real Alpha King still lives beneath the palace. The dungeon became completely still. The Alpha King closed his eyes for one quiet moment. The whispers had escaped. Hope had reached the kingdom. There was no prison strong enough to lock it away again. The council lord turned toward the captain. Seal every gate. Kill anyone who refuses obedience. His desperate words echoed through the corridor. For the first time, they sounded less like commands and more like fear. The captain looked toward the Alpha King, then toward the frightened soldiers surrounding him. Finally toward Alara. His decision came quietly. I cannot raise my sword against innocent people. He removed the royal badge from his armor and let it fall upon the stone floor. The sound echoed like the end of an era. One after another, more guards removed their badges. Metal struck stone again and again. The false kingdom was beginning to crumble from within. The council lord stepped backward until his shoulders touched the cold wall. He suddenly understood the terrible truth. He had spent months chaining one king. But he had never chained the loyalty that king had planted inside thousands of hearts. As chaos spread through the palace above, the Alpha King looked toward the hidden northern wall once more. The secret passage remained closed. But now he no longer needed only one hidden path. Because beyond the prison walls, an entire kingdom had begun opening the road back to its rightful ruler, and somewhere within the growing crowd gathering outside the palace gates, a single battle horn suddenly echoed across the valley. It was the ancient call of the Royal Shadow Guard. The sound that had not been heard since the night the Alpha King disappeared. His loyal warriors had finally returned. The ancient battle horn continued echoing across the valley until every stone of the palace seemed to tremble beneath its call. It was a sound buried by time and silenced by betrayal, yet no loyal heart had ever forgotten it. Men who had once hidden their allegiance behind quiet lives slowly lifted their heads. Old warriors looked toward the castle walls with tears gathering in tired eyes. Mothers who remembered the days of the true Alpha King pulled their children closer and whispered stories they had not dared tell for many months. The kingdom was no longer sleeping. It was waking. Outside the palace, thousands of people gathered before the massive northern gates. Farmers stood beside blacksmiths. Hunters stood beside merchants. Young warriors stood beside old veterans whose bodies had grown weak, but whose loyalty had never faded. None carried expensive armor. None marched beneath royal banners. They came carrying only one truth that no sword could silence. Their king still lived. High above them, frightened nobles watched from stone balconies. They had spent months believing fear would keep the people obedient forever. Now they understood that fear lasted only until hope returned. Once hope awakened, it spread faster than any army. Inside the dungeon, the Alpha King quietly listened to the distant voices rising beyond the palace walls. Every cheer reached him. The palace gates could no longer hide the truth. The voices outside grew louder with every passing moment until they rolled across the kingdom like the arrival of a great storm. The people were no longer asking questions. They already knew the answer. Their true Alpha King had survived. The lie that had ruled the kingdom for months was breaking apart before sunrise. Inside the dungeon, the captain slowly walked toward the prison. His sword remained at his side. His eyes carried no hatred anymore, only regret. He stopped before the Alpha King and lowered his head. I spent months guarding these chains. Today, I choose to break them. Without another word, he removed the heavy ring of prison keys from his belt. One lock opened, then another, then another. The sound echoed through the underground halls like freedom itself. The thick chains binding the Alpha King's wrists finally fell onto the stone floor. For the first time in many endless months, he stood without iron holding him back. No one spoke. Every guard watched in complete silence. The Alpha King slowly lifted his hands and looked at the deep scars crossing his wrists. Those scars would never disappear. They would remain forever, not as signs of weakness, as reminders that betrayal could wound a king, but never destroy him. The white wolf stepped beside him and gently rested its head against his shoulder. King and guardian stood together once again, exactly as they had before the night everything was stolen. The young guards quietly opened the second gate, then the third. One by one, every barrier inside the dungeon disappeared. The road leading upward finally stood open. The Alpha King looked toward Alara. She smiled through tears that refused to stop falling. "You are free." He gently shook his head. "Freedom is only the beginning. Justice still waits above us." Together they climbed the ancient staircase. Every step carried them farther from darkness. Every step carried the kingdom closer to truth. When the great wooden doors opened, bright sunlight poured into the underground corridor. The Alpha King stopped for only a heartbeat. Fresh air filled his lungs for the first time since his betrayal. The warm light touched his face. Behind him walked the white wolf. Beside him walked Alara. Behind them marched soldiers who had chosen honor over fear. The moment they appeared inside the palace courtyard, complete silence covered the fortress. Servants stopped working, knights lowered their weapons. Even the false rulers standing upon the royal balcony froze where they stood. The Alpha King slowly walked forward with calm confidence. Months of suffering had not bent his back. They had strengthened it. His eyes met those of the Council Lord. No anger filled his face, no hatred, only absolute certainty. The Council Lord stumbled backward. His knees weakened beneath him. He understood before anyone spoke. His reign had already ended. The palace gates suddenly burst open. Thousands of people flooded into the courtyard, not to fight, not to destroy, to witness. Old warriors dropped to one knee. The villagers followed, then the merchants, then the palace servants. Soon the entire courtyard became a sea of bowed heads. One voice rose above the crowd. "Welcome home, my king." The words spread through the people like fire carried by the wind. "Welcome home, welcome home, welcome home." The Alpha King slowly turned toward the crowd. He raised one hand. Silence returned instantly. That single gesture proved something no crown ever could. True authority was never forced. It was earned. He looked across every face before speaking. A kingdom built on fear can never stand forever. A kingdom built on loyalty can never truly fall. Today, we end the rule of lies. Today, every family receives justice. Today, no child will grow beneath stolen promises again. The people answered with thunderous cheers that echoed across mountains far beyond the palace walls. The council members surrendered without another fight. Their power disappeared the moment the people withdrew their belief. The Alpha King reclaimed his throne not through revenge, but through truth. Days later, the kingdom gathered once more beneath clear skies. The broken banners of the traitors had vanished. The ancient royal standard flew proudly above the highest tower once again. Children laughed freely through the streets. Markets filled with life. Hope replaced fear. The white wolf rested peacefully beside the throne, no longer wounded, no longer chained. Alara stood nearby, wearing simple clothes just as she always had. She had never asked for wealth. She had never searched for power. Yet the Alpha King looked toward her with deep gratitude. "Your song saved more than a wounded beast. It saved an entire kingdom." She smiled softly. Sometimes the quietest voice carries the greatest strength. The Alpha King looked across the peaceful land stretching beyond the palace walls. The throne beneath him had been reclaimed. His people were finally safe. But he knew. True leadership was not measured by the crown upon his head. It was measured by every life protected beneath it. As the sun disappeared beyond the distant mountains, the white wolf lifted its head and released one final powerful howl into the evening sky. This time, it was not a cry of pain. It was the song of victory. The song of loyalty. The song of a king who had returned from darkness stronger than ever before. And from that day forward, every child born inside the kingdom grew up hearing one unforgettable truth. Never underestimate kindness, because one Omega's song awakened the Alpha King. And one awakened Alpha King changed the fate of an entire kingdom forever.
The day the Alpha King let her leave was the day the entire kingdom believed his legend had finally begun to die. No army stood outside the palace walls. No enemy banners covered the mountains. No blood stained the royal courtyard. Yet every soul inside the kingdom felt that something far greater than a battle had just been lost. The gates of the royal palace opened with a slow echo that rolled through the stone halls like distant thunder. Hundreds of royal guards stood in perfect formation. Their armor reflected the pale, morning light. Their faces remained expressionless. No one moved. No one dared breathe too loudly. She stepped through those gates with nothing but a small leather bag resting against her shoulder. No crown rested upon her head. No jewels sparkled around her neck. No servants followed behind her. She looked exactly as she had the day she first arrived. Simple, quiet, free. Every person watching expected the Alpha King to stop her before she reached the end of the bridge. He never did. Far above the courtyard, the Alpha King stood alone upon the highest balcony of the palace. His black cloak moved gently beneath the cold mountain wind. His silver eyes never left the woman walking farther away with every passing heartbeat. His face showed nothing. Not regret. Not anger. Not sorrow. Years of ruling had taught him that emotions could become weapons in the hands of ambitious people. Every smile could be twisted into weakness. Every tear could become an invitation for betrayal. So he buried every feeling beneath silence, until even those closest to him believed he no longer possessed a heart. Only one creature had ever seen beyond that mask. The great white wolf rested beside the throne room entrance. Larger than any ordinary wolf and covered in thick silver white, for the beast had followed the Alpha King since he was little more than a frightened prince. Together, they had survived assassins, harsh winters, endless wars, and betrayals that would have destroyed weaker men. The kingdom called the wolf a living legend. Children believed it could smell lies. Soldiers believed it feared nothing. Enemies believed that as long as the wolf remained beside the Alpha King, no army could ever defeat him. The wolf slowly lifted its head. Its golden eyes followed the woman walking toward the distant mountain road. It did not blink. It did not move. The Alpha King noticed the change, but remained silent. Silence had become his closest companion long before he became king. The royal council gathered beneath the balcony wearing heavy robes stitched with ancient symbols of the kingdom. They exchanged quiet glances, filled with satisfaction. For years they had searched for the smallest crack in the Alpha King's armor. They believed they had finally found it. One elderly council member lowered his head respectfully before speaking. "Your Majesty, she has left the kingdom exactly as you ordered." The Alpha King gave only the smallest nod. Nothing more. The council member stepped back with hidden relief shining inside his tired eyes. Around him, the other nobles quietly relaxed. They had expected resistance. They had expected the king to change his mind. Instead, he had allowed the woman to leave without protest. To them, that single decision proved one dangerous thing. The Alpha King had become vulnerable. Rumors traveled faster than arrows. Before the woman even reached the forest road, whispers had already spread across the capital. People gathered inside crowded marketplaces, speaking in careful voices. Some claimed the king had grown cold enough to abandon the one person who had once saved his life. Others believed she had committed some terrible crime hidden from the public. Many simply shook their heads, believing that no throne could ever replace genuine loyalty. Inside the palace walls, those whispers sounded even louder. Every servant heard them. Every guard repeated them. Every noble added something new. No one knew the truth. Only the Alpha King remembered the freezing night that had changed everything. Years earlier, snow had buried the northern forest beneath endless, white silence. A secret hunting trip had turned into an assassination. His closest companions had died protecting him. His horse collapsed beneath poisoned arrows. His own blood stained the frozen ground. He had wandered through the blizzard until his strength finally disappeared. Death waited only a few steps away. Then she found him. She had not seen a king. She had not seen the ruler feared across every kingdom. She saw only a wounded stranger struggling to breathe beneath falling snow. She carried him to a small wooden cabin hidden deep inside the forest. For many days she cared for him without asking his name. She shared the last of her food. She stayed awake through freezing nights feeding the fire whenever it began to fade. She wrapped fresh bandages around wounds that should have ended his life. Never once did she ask for anything in return. When soldiers finally discovered the cabin, they fell to one knee before him. Only then did she realize who the stranger truly was. Most people would have fallen before the throne seeking riches or titles. She simply smiled with quiet relief because the wounded man she had rescued would survive. That moment stayed inside the Alpha King's memory long after every battle had faded. It became the one memory untouched by lies, untouched by ambition, untouched by fear. As weeks became months, she remained inside the palace as an honored guest. She never acted like royalty. She walked through the gardens before sunrise. She greeted servants with kindness. She spent hours feeding injured animals brought back by hunters. Even the oldest palace workers found themselves smiling whenever she passed. She changed nothing through force. She changed everything simply by existing. The Alpha King noticed every small detail, though he never admitted it. He noticed the way frightened children stopped crying when she entered a room. He noticed exhausted soldiers standing a little straighter after speaking with her. He noticed that even the palace felt warmer whenever she laughed. That frightened him more than war itself. Kings who loved too deeply became easy targets. He had seen it happen before. His own father trusted the wrong people because of love. His mother died protecting the family she believed would never betray her. His older brother disappeared after placing faith in those hungry for power. The throne had taught him one brutal lesson. Attachment always created weakness. Weakness invited betrayal. Betrayal always demanded blood. So when she quietly asked for her freedom, he granted it without hesitation. Not because he wanted her gone, because he believed it was the only way to keep her alive. If she stayed, every rival alpha would hunt her. Every ambitious noble would manipulate her. Every hidden enemy would use her as a weapon against the throne. Walking away from him offered her the one thing he could never guarantee inside the palace: peace. Far below the balcony, she reached the final stone bridge, leading away from the kingdom. The mountain wind suddenly grew still. The banners hanging above the walls stopped moving. Even the horses inside the royal stables became strangely restless. The great white wolf slowly rose to its feet. Its massive paws touched the cold stone floor without making a sound. Every guard immediately noticed. Several instinctively reached for their swords before remembering exactly who stood before them. No one blocked its path. The wolf walked forward with calm, steady steps. It passed the throne. It crossed the royal hall. It entered the courtyard. The entire palace watched in complete silence. No command had been given. No signal had been made. The Alpha King remained perfectly still. His eyes followed the wolf just as carefully as they followed the woman. Deep inside, something unfamiliar began to stir. The wolf had never disobeyed him. Not once. Not in childhood. Not in war. Not even when death stood only a breath away. Yet today it continued walking toward the palace gates without waiting for permission. No one inside the kingdom realized they were about to witness the first crack in a legend that would soon reshape every destiny connected to the throne. No one spoke. The silence itself became heavier than armor. Every eye followed the great white wolf as it crossed the palace courtyard with slow, unshakable confidence. The royal guards instinctively stepped aside. None of them had received an order to move. None of them dared remain in its path. They had watched the legendary beast stand beside the Alpha King through battles that had rewritten the borders of kingdoms. They had seen it charge through storms of arrows without hesitation. Never once had it chosen its own direction. Until now, the Alpha King remained on the highest balcony. His hands rested behind his back. His breathing never changed. Anyone looking at him would have believed nothing inside him had moved. The truth was very different. His heart recognized something long before his mind accepted it. The wolf was not abandoning him. It was following something it believed even the king needed to understand. The beast crossed the final palace gate. Its massive paws touched the ancient stone bridge leading beyond the kingdom walls. Every step echoed across the valley below. The sound carried through the mountain air until even the workers outside the city stopped what they were doing. The woman continued walking. She never looked behind her. She believed this chapter of her life had already ended. She believed the palace belonged to the past. The wind carried the scent of pine trees through the mountain road. Birds circled above the forest. Sunlight slipped between towering cliffs and painted long golden shadows across the ground. Then she heard footsteps. Not hurried, not threatening. Slow, steady, certain. She turned gently. The great white wolf stood only a few steps away. Its silver fur shimmered beneath the morning light like fresh snow beneath the moon. Its golden eyes remained calm. There was no anger inside them, no hunger, no command, only unwavering loyalty. She stared in complete disbelief. The wolf slowly closed the remaining distance. Then it lowered its powerful body beside her feet. It sat quietly. It refused to move. For several long moments the mountain road became completely silent. She looked toward the palace standing high above the valley. It seemed impossibly far away now. The enormous castle still dominated the mountains with proud stone towers reaching toward the clouds. Somewhere inside those walls stood the Alpha King. Watching. Waiting. She lowered herself carefully until she was sitting beside the wolf. Her voice barely rose above the whispering wind. You should go home. The wolf never moved. She smiled with quiet sadness. Home is with your king. Again the wolf remained exactly where it was. Its eyes never left hers. Far away inside the palace, the royal council watched everything unfold from the balcony below the throne room. Disbelief slowly transformed into excitement. One noble leaned closer to another. His voice remained low enough that only a few people heard him. The beast has chosen her. Another answered with quiet satisfaction. No. The kingdom will believe it has abandoned the king. That difference changes everything. Those words spread through the council like poison flowing through clear water. Within minutes, secret plans began forming behind carefully controlled expressions. If the people believed the Alpha King could no longer command the symbol of his own authority, then doubt would spread faster than fear. And kingdoms built upon fear never survived doubt for long. The oldest council members understood this better than anyone. Power rarely disappeared in a single battle. It disappeared one question at a time. Can he still lead? Can he still protect? Can he still rule? Those questions alone could destroy an empire. The Alpha King heard every whispered conversation carried upward by the cold mountain wind. Still he remained silent. He knew his enemies expected anger. They wanted him to command the wolf back. They wanted the beast to hesitate. Either outcome would reveal weakness. Instead, he gave them nothing. His silence became impossible to understand. The council mistook restraint for uncertainty. His enemies mistook patience for fear. Only the wolf understood the truth. Hours passed. The woman finally stood once more. She adjusted the small leather bag resting against her shoulder and continued walking toward the northern forest. The wolf rose immediately. Without hesitation, it followed beside her. Not ahead, not behind. Beside her. like a silent guardian chosen by fate itself. News traveled across the kingdom before sunset. Messengers carried unbelievable stories from village to village. Farmers left their fields discussing the impossible. Hunters returning from the mountains repeated the same tale. The Alpha King's legendary wolf had walked away from the throne. By nightfall, the story reached neighboring kingdoms. Rival Alpha rulers laughed inside their great halls. Some called it a sign from destiny. Others believed the mighty wolf kingdom had finally begun to fracture from within. None of them understood what had truly happened. Inside the palace, another kind of darkness slowly awakened. Hidden passages beneath the ancient castle filled with quiet footsteps. Cloaked figures entered forgotten chambers, lit only by flickering firelight. Maps covered heavy wooden tables. Small carved pieces marked border fortresses, trade routes, military camps. The people gathered there had waited years for this opportunity. They believed the Alpha King stood alone for the first time since claiming the throne. One voice broke the silence. If doubt spreads through the kingdom, then loyalty will weaken. Another answered without hesitation. And once loyalty weakens, the throne belongs to whoever moves first. Plans were made before midnight. Secret letters were prepared. Trusted messengers rode beneath darkness toward distant kingdoms. Old enemies suddenly found common purpose. Not because they were stronger than the Alpha King, because they believed he had become weaker. Far beyond the palace walls, the woman reached the edge of the ancient northern forest. Massive trees stretched toward the sky. Their branches blocked most of the fading sunlight. Cool air drifted between the trunks, carrying the scent of pine moss and wild earth. She stopped beside a narrow stream flowing across smooth stones. The wolf quietly drank from the clear water. Its reflection shimmered beside hers. She watched the great creature with growing confusion. Why would you leave him? The question escaped almost without thought. The wolf slowly lifted its head. Its golden eyes met hers once again. There was something unusual inside them. Not obedience, not instinct, recognition. As though it had already seen a future no human could yet imagine. A cold breeze swept through the forest. Leaves rustled overhead. Somewhere deep among the trees, a raven suddenly took flight. The wolf turned sharply toward the darkness between the ancient pines. Its entire body became perfectly still. Every muscle tightened. Every instinct awakened. The woman followed its gaze. She saw nothing, only endless shadows stretching deeper into the silent forest. But the wolf continued watching. Its ears remained raised. Its breathing slowed. It had sensed something. Far away inside the palace, the Alpha King stepped away from the balcony for the first time that day. He walked alone through empty stone corridors where every torch cast long shadows across the walls. Each step echoed through the silent castle. His mind returned to one unshakable truth. The wolf had never once acted without reason. Not once in all the years they had survived together. If it had chosen to remain beside her, then danger was already moving. Not toward the throne. Toward her. He stopped before the ancient map of the kingdom carved into the palace wall. His fingers rested upon the northern forest. His silver eyes slowly narrowed. For the first time in years, he felt something stronger than suspicion. He felt certainty. Someone else already knew who she was. And before another sunrise, the first move in a hidden war would begin. The Alpha King did not sleep that night. Darkness covered the palace, but his mind refused to rest. Every torch burning along the ancient stone corridors threw long shadows across the walls. Those shadows reminded him of the countless enemies he had defeated. Yet none of those victories felt as dangerous as the silence surrounding him now. Armies always announced themselves with steel and fire. Betrayal arrived without a sound. He stood before the enormous map carved into black stone inside the royal war chamber. His silver eyes rested upon the northern forest where the woman had disappeared only hours earlier. Every road leading toward those woods passed through lonely valleys and abandoned watchtowers. He knew every path. He had ridden across them during wars that lasted years. But tonight those familiar lands felt strangely unknown. His instincts had never failed him. Neither had the wolf. That single truth refused to leave his thoughts. The wolf had crossed the palace without waiting for a command. It had ignored the throne. It had followed only one person. Such a thing had never happened before. Not during battles. Not during hunts. Not even when the Alpha King himself had been close to death. The beast had chosen her. There had to be a reason. Far away beneath the ancient trees, the woman slowly continued her journey through the northern forest. Morning sunlight struggled to break through the thick branches high above her. Golden rays touched the forest floor in scattered pieces. Mist floated between towering pines while the air carried the scent of wet earth and fresh moss. The peaceful silence should have brought comfort. Instead, it carried a strange feeling. Someone was watching. She stopped beside a narrow stream flowing gently over smooth stones. The white wolf lifted its head before she even sensed anything unusual. Its ears turned toward the deeper forest. Every muscle beneath its thick silver fur became tense. Nothing appeared. No footsteps echoed between the trees. No voices drifted through the wind. Yet the wolf refused to relax. She quietly knelt beside the stream and watched her own reflection trembling across the water. Beside it appeared the reflection of the wolf.
Strong. Calm.
Unmoving. She spoke softly. You have protected him your entire life. Why are you protecting me now? The wolf answered only with silence. Its golden eyes remained fixed upon the darkness ahead. Some questions did not need words. Back inside the palace, another meeting had already begun. The royal council gathered inside a circular chamber hidden beneath the eastern tower. Thick stone walls blocked every sound from escaping. Tall candles burned around a polished table where the oldest nobles quietly exchanged careful glances. No one mentioned loyalty. No one mentioned honor. Only power mattered. One council member slowly stood. His gray beard rested against robes embroidered with ancient symbols of the kingdom. His voice remained calm, but every word carried dangerous confidence. The people have started asking questions. Another noble smiled faintly. Questions become doubt. Doubt becomes fear. Fear destroys kings. Several heads nodded together. For years they had searched for an opportunity to weaken the Alpha King without raising a sword. Now, they believed fate itself had opened the door for them. The story of the white wolf spread through every village faster than wildfire racing across dry grass. By tomorrow, even distant kingdoms would hear the same tale. The beast had left its master. That was all people needed to believe. Truth no longer mattered. Perception ruled kingdoms. Far beyond the palace walls, riders wearing dark cloaks quietly crossed frozen mountain passes beneath the fading moon. None carried royal banners. None wore family symbols. Hidden messages rested inside leather pouches tied beneath their saddles. Every rider traveled toward a different kingdom. Every letter carried the same promise. The Wolf Kingdom had finally become vulnerable. While conspiracies moved beneath darkness, the Alpha King summoned no generals. He called no emergency council. He ordered no army to march. His silence confused everyone. Some believed he had accepted defeat. Others believed grief had clouded his judgment. Only one old commander understood the truth. He had fought beside the king since childhood. He had witnessed every impossible victory. He knew the Alpha King never moved until every piece of the board revealed itself. Patience had won more battles than swords. Still, the old commander approached him with quiet concern. "Your Majesty." The Alpha King slowly turned. The commander lowered his head. "The kingdom grows restless." The Alpha King answered with only one sentence. "Restless hearts expose hidden enemies."
Nothing more needed to be said.
The commander understood. The trap had already begun. Meanwhile, the woman reached the ruins of an ancient stone temple forgotten by almost everyone alive. Time had broken its towering pillars. Thick vines covered cracked walls. Moss grew across faded carvings older than the kingdom itself. A cool breeze drifted through empty archways, carrying whispers that sounded almost alive. She stepped carefully inside. The white wolf remained close beside her. Its eyes searched every corner before allowing her to move farther. She noticed strange markings carved into the broken stone floor. Wolves surrounded a great tree whose branches reached toward the stars. At the center stood the figure of a woman placing one hand upon the head of a great white beast. The image felt strangely familiar. She could not explain why. She reached out carefully and brushed away centuries of dust. The moment her fingers touched the ancient carving, the wolf suddenly stood. Its breathing changed. Its ears lifted sharply. Something had awakened. A cold wind swept through the ruined temple without warning. Leaves spiraled across the broken floor. The sunlight disappeared behind dark clouds rolling over the mountains. Far above the forest, a single raven cried before disappearing into the sky. The woman slowly looked around. She felt it again. Someone was watching. This time the feeling was stronger. Much stronger. Hidden beyond the broken walls, a pair of unseen eyes silently observed every movement she made. The stranger never stepped forward, never spoke, never revealed a face. Only patience. Only careful observation. The white wolf moved directly in front of the woman. Its massive body blocked her completely. A low warning growl echoed through the abandoned temple. The unseen watcher quietly disappeared into the forest without leaving a single footprint behind. The silence returned. But nothing felt peaceful anymore. Back inside the palace, the Alpha King walked alone through the Hall of Ancestors, where enormous statues of past rulers stood beneath towering stone arches. Every king before him held a sword carved from black marble. Every face looked fearless. Yet he knew their true stories. Many had fallen not because enemies stood outside the walls. They had fallen because betrayal had already entered through the front gate. He stopped before the statue of his father. The old king had trusted too easily. That mistake had destroyed an entire generation. The Alpha King quietly closed his eyes. His thoughts returned once again to the white wolf. The beast had sensed danger long before anyone else. It always had. His eyes slowly opened. Cold determination replaced uncertainty. He finally understood what his enemies had failed to realize. The wolf had not left the king behind. The wolf had gone ahead of him. And somewhere inside the northern forest, a hidden game had already begun long before anyone inside the palace even knew they were playing. The forest never truly became silent again. The moment the hidden watcher disappeared, the wind itself seemed to change. The trees no longer swayed with peaceful rhythm. Their ancient branches leaned over the narrow path like silent guardians hiding forgotten secrets. Every shadow appeared deeper than before. Every sound carried meaning. The woman slowly stepped away from the ruined temple. The white wolf remained close enough that its shoulder almost brushed against hers. It no longer wandered freely through the forest. Every movement became measured. Every pause lasted a little longer. Its golden eyes searched every hill, every fallen tree, and every dark opening between the pines. Whatever it had sensed had not disappeared. It had only moved. Far above the northern forest, dark clouds drifted across the mountains. Sunlight faded until the world turned silver and gray. Cold air flowed through the valleys, carrying the scent of approaching rain. She wrapped her cloak more tightly around herself. This forest had once felt familiar. Now, it felt alive. Not with beauty, with warning. She continued walking until the trees slowly opened into a quiet valley surrounded by steep cliffs. A narrow river crossed the center of the clearing. Crystal water rushed over smooth stones while patches of wildflowers danced beneath the growing wind. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to stop. The wolf walked to the edge of the river and looked toward the flowing water. Its reflection trembled beneath the current. Then suddenly it raised its head. Its ears locked onto something beyond the opposite ridge. A deep growl escaped its chest. Not loud, not wild, controlled. The woman turned toward the same direction.
She saw nothing.
Only empty cliffs. Only drifting mist. Yet her heartbeat quickened without reason. The wolf never growled without cause. Miles away inside the royal capital, another kind of storm gathered. The royal council had begun spreading quiet stories throughout the kingdom. Merchants leaving the city carried carefully chosen rumors. Travelers repeated them from village to village. Every version sounded slightly different. The Alpha King had changed. The legendary wolf had abandoned the throne. The kingdom had entered an age of uncertainty. No one openly challenged the king. Not yet. The council understood that poison worked slowly. Doubt needed time. Fear needed patience. The strongest walls often collapsed from cracks no one noticed. Inside the throne room, the Alpha King listened as reports arrived one after another. The northern villages had begun asking questions. Border commanders requested reassurance. Even loyal soldiers wondered why the wolf remained away from the palace. The king answered none of those questions. Instead, he dismissed every messenger. When the great hall finally stood empty, he slowly descended from the throne. His footsteps echoed across polished stone. He stopped before the place where the white wolf had always rested. The space remained empty. For the first time in many years, the throne room felt larger, colder, almost unfamiliar. He closed his eyes for only a moment. Every memory returned with perfect clarity. He remembered a frightened wolf cub standing alone beside the frozen body of its mother. He remembered carrying that tiny creature through endless snow. He remembered growing beside it, training beside it, bleeding beside it. The wolf had never failed him. Not once. If it had chosen another path, then the danger ahead must have been greater than the danger behind. That thought changed everything. His uncertainty disappeared. Purpose took its place. Far beyond the capital, the woman continued deeper into the valley until she noticed something unusual. Fresh footprints marked the soft earth near the riverbank. They were not animal tracks. They belonged to people. Several of them. She slowly knelt beside the ground. The prints looked recent. Very recent. Someone had passed through the valley only hours before. The wolf lowered its nose close to the earth. Its breathing became slower. Its eyes hardened. Without warning, it stepped directly between the woman and the footprints. Its body formed a silent shield. She looked around carefully. The valley appeared empty. The river continued flowing peacefully. Birds circled high above. Everything looked normal. Yet nothing felt safe. Hidden beyond the cliffs, a single figure watched from the shadows. A black cloak blended perfectly with the rocks surrounding the valley. The stranger remained completely motionless. No weapon appeared. No attack came. Only observation. Only patience. The stranger slowly disappeared before either the woman or the wolf could discover the hiding place. The game continued. Inside the palace, the Alpha King entered the ancient royal library beneath the western tower. Dust-covered shelves filled with forgotten histories written by rulers long before his own bloodline claimed the throne. Most kings entered this place searching for answers after losing wars. He entered before the war had even begun. An elderly keeper of records quietly approached. He had served 3 generations of kings. Very little escaped his memory. The Alpha King spoke only a single question. Has there ever been another time when the royal wolf chose someone outside the throne? The old man became strangely silent. His eyes searched the endless shelves before finally resting upon one weathered book hidden behind countless others. He carefully placed it upon the table. Its leather cover had nearly faded away. Many pages had become fragile with age. The Alpha King slowly opened the ancient record. Inside, he found stories written centuries earlier. Stories almost forgotten. One passage immediately caught his attention. It spoke of a royal wolf that once left its alpha not out of betrayal, but because it sensed a threat before any human could see it. The wolf had protected the future of the kingdom, not the present. The Alpha King read those words again. Then once more. His breathing slowed. Everything suddenly began fitting together. The wolf had not chosen between him and the woman. It had chosen the kingdom itself. Meanwhile, the woman climbed a narrow trail leading toward higher ground. Evening shadows stretched across the mountains. The air became colder with every step. She finally reached an overlook where the entire valley spread beneath her. The view should have been beautiful. Instead, she noticed thin trails of smoke rising far away among the distant trees.
Small campfires.
Too many to belong to hunters. Too organized to belong to travelers. The white wolf stood beside her, its gaze fixed upon the same distant smoke. Both remained perfectly still. Neither knew exactly who waited beyond those trees. But one thing had become painfully clear. The northern forest was no longer empty. Someone had arrived before them. Someone had been preparing in silence. And before another sunrise, the first hidden enemy would finally step out of the shadows. The first light of dawn revealed something the darkness had carefully hidden. Thin lines of smoke still rose above the northern forest. They drifted through the cold morning air before disappearing beneath heavy clouds gathering over the mountains. The valley looked peaceful from a distance. Wildflowers covered the hills. Crystal water flowed quietly between smooth stones. Birds circled high above the trees. But peace had already left this place. The woman remained standing on the rocky overlook while the great white wolf stared toward the distant campfires without blinking. Its body had become completely still. Only its eyes moved. The wolf had reached a decision. Without warning, it turned away from the valley and began climbing toward an older path almost invisible beneath tangled roots and thick moss. The woman hesitated only for a moment. Every instinct told her to continue toward the nearest village. Every heartbeat told her to follow the wolf. She chose the wolf. The narrow trail twisted through ancient pines older than memory itself. Giant roots crossed the ground like frozen rivers. Thick branches blocked most of the morning light, leaving only scattered beams shining across the forest floor. Every step carried them farther away from ordinary roads. The silence felt different here. Not empty. Watching. After nearly an hour, the path opened into a forgotten clearing hidden between towering cliffs. Time had erased nearly every sign that people had once lived there. Broken stone walls rested beneath vines. Collapsed roofs disappeared beneath green moss. An abandoned well stood in the center, surrounded by cracked statues whose faces had long ago been worn away by wind and rain. The woman slowly walked across the clearing. Something about the place felt strangely familiar. Not because she remembered it, because it felt as though the land itself had been waiting. The wolf approached one broken statue covered by centuries of moss. It gently pressed its nose against the stone. Nothing happened. Then a sudden gust of wind swept across the clearing. Loose leaves spiraled into the air. Dust drifted away from the ancient carving. Beneath the moss appeared the image of a great white wolf standing beside a crowned ruler whose face had almost disappeared with time. The woman stared quietly. She had seen similar carvings inside the ruined temple. The same wolf. The same silent connection. The same mystery. Far away inside the royal palace, the Alpha King stood before the ancient book still resting upon the library table. He had not slept. Every page revealed forgotten stories buried beneath generations of war and politics. Most kings had ignored these records. He no longer could. Another passage caught his attention. It described an old belief carried by the first rulers of the Wolf Kingdom. The royal wolf did not simply protect the Alpha. It protected the future chosen by destiny. The king slowly closed the book. His thoughts returned to the woman. Everything he believed about strength had begun changing. He had ruled through fear because fear brought order. Yet the wolf had followed someone who ruled nothing. Someone who desired no crown, no army, no throne, only freedom. Perhaps power was not what he thought it was. Meanwhile, the royal council celebrated in secret. Reports continued arriving from neighboring kingdoms. Rival Alpha rulers had begun gathering warriors near the borders. Trade caravans suddenly avoided the capital. Several noble families quietly withdrew their support from the throne while pretending nothing had changed. The council welcomed every new report. Everything moved exactly as planned. One council member smiled while looking across the round stone table. The kingdom is beginning to shake. Another answered calmly. Soon the people will beg for new leadership. None of them noticed the oldest council member remaining unusually silent. Unlike the others, he had lived through enough wars to recognize dangerous confidence. He quietly watched the younger nobles celebrating too early. The Alpha King had survived impossible battles before. He had never been defeated by panic. That thought refused to leave his mind. Back inside the hidden clearing, the woman slowly lowered herself beside the abandoned well. She brushed dust away from its ancient stones and looked into the darkness below. The well appeared empty. Then she noticed something reflecting deep beneath the water. A faint silver light. She leaned closer. The reflection vanished. The white wolf immediately stepped beside her and gently nudged her away from the edge. Its movement came so quickly that she nearly lost her balance. At that exact moment, part of the ancient stone surrounding the well suddenly collapsed into darkness. Heavy rocks crashed far below. The echo continued for several long seconds. Had she remained leaning forward another heartbeat, she would have fallen with them. She looked at the wolf with silent gratitude. The beast simply returned its attention toward the surrounding forest. Its work was not finished. The clearing had become too quiet. Even the birds had disappeared. A cold wind drifted between broken buildings, carrying the distant sound of branches breaking somewhere beyond the cliffs. The woman slowly stood. Someone was moving nearby. She could not see anyone, yet she no longer doubted the feeling. The wolf stepped ahead of her. Its posture changed completely. Its shoulders lowered. Its muscles tightened. Its golden eyes locked onto a narrow passage leading between enormous stones at the far end of the clearing. Several long moments passed. Nothing appeared. Then a shadow crossed the opening.
Gone almost instantly.
Too fast for any ordinary traveler. The woman caught only the briefest glimpse. A dark cloak. Nothing more. The wolf immediately ran toward the passage. She hurried after it. The narrow trail beyond twisted sharply between steep cliffs before descending into another part of the forest. Fresh footprints marked the damp earth. The stranger had been there only moments earlier. The wolf lowered its nose close to the ground before moving forward without hesitation. The chase had begun. Far behind them inside the palace, the Alpha King entered the royal training grounds where hundreds of soldiers practiced beneath the morning sun. Every warrior immediately stopped upon seeing him. He slowly looked across their faces. Strong men,
Loyal men.
men willing to die for their king. But loyalty built only upon commands would never survive the coming storm.
He finally understood that.
Without giving a speech, he picked up a training sword. The soldiers watched in complete silence. The Alpha King stepped into the center of the field. One by one his captains entered to face him. No anger filled his movements. Only precision. Every strike taught. Every defense guided. Every victory inspired instead of humiliating. For the first time, many soldiers saw something different in their ruler. Not only strength.
Trust.
Respect spread across the training ground far faster than fear ever had. The old commander standing nearby quietly smiled. The king had begun changing. Not because he had become weaker. Because he had discovered a greater kind of power. Deep inside the northern forest, the white wolf suddenly stopped. Its ears lifted sharply. The fresh tracks ended without explanation. The stranger had vanished. The woman slowly caught her breath. She looked around at the endless trees surrounding them. There were no roads, no villages, no hiding places, only silence. Then she noticed something carved into the trunk of a towering pine. A single symbol. The same symbol she had seen inside the ruined temple. The same symbol carved into the forgotten statue. Someone had left it recently. Someone wanted it to be found. The wolf slowly turned toward the deeper forest where the trees stood so close together that daylight could barely reach the ground. Without making a sound, it took another step forward. Then another. Whatever waited ahead was no longer hiding by accident. It was leading them somewhere. The deeper they walked into the forest, the more the world behind them seemed to disappear. The towering pines grew so close together that daylight reached the ground only in thin silver lines. Ancient roots twisted across the earth like sleeping serpents. Cold mist drifted silently between the trees, hiding everything beyond a few steps ahead. Every breath carried the scent of rain, wet bark, and old stone. The woman stayed close behind the great white wolf. She had stopped asking where they were going. The wolf never hesitated. It moved with complete certainty, as though it had walked this forgotten path many times before. Hours passed without seeing another soul. Then the forest changed. The dense trees slowly opened into a wide circle surrounded by enormous standing stones. Every stone reached twice the height of a man. Strange carvings covered their weathered surfaces. Wolves.
Crowns.
Mountains. Stars. The same symbols appeared again. Nothing here was accidental. Everything belonged together. The woman stepped carefully toward the nearest stone and rested her hand against its cold surface. The ancient carving felt worn beneath her fingertips, almost alive. A sudden gust of wind rushed through the circle. Leaves spiraled into the air. The white wolf lifted its head toward the sky. Its ears stood perfectly still. Then, without warning, it released a long, powerful howl. The sound rolled across the mountains. It echoed through every valley. It climbed every cliff. The forest itself seemed to answer. Silence followed. Then another howl echoed back. Far away, deep within the mountains, the woman slowly turned. That answer had not come from an ordinary wolf. Someone else had heard them. Far inside the royal palace, the Alpha King stood before the highest tower, overlooking the kingdom. Clouds covered the sky while cold rain began falling across the castle walls. Messengers arrived one after another bringing disturbing news. Border villages had reported strangers traveling beneath darkness. Supply routes had become unreliable. Several loyal houses had suddenly stopped answering royal summons. Everything pointed toward one truth. The conspiracy had already begun moving. The Alpha King listened quietly until the final messenger finished speaking. Then he asked only one question. How many villages remain loyal? The answer surprised everyone. More than expected. The people still trusted him. Not because of fear. Because throughout his reign no child had starved during winter. No village had been abandoned during plague. No enemy had crossed the borders while he ruled. The council had underestimated something impossible to measure. Respect. The Alpha King slowly looked toward the mountains. His enemies believed the kingdom belonged to the throne. They were wrong. It belonged to the people. Meanwhile, hidden beneath the eastern wing of the palace, the council gathered once again. Their confidence had begun showing small cracks. Reports from the countryside refused to match their expectations. The people questioned the rumors. Many villagers openly defended their king. Some even refused to repeat the stories spread by traveling merchants. One younger noble slammed his hand against the heavy wooden table. Why are they still loyal? The oldest council member finally answered. Because loyalty earned through protection survives longer than loyalty created through fear. No one replied. The room became uncomfortably quiet. Back inside the ancient stone circle, the white wolf slowly walked toward a narrow opening between two towering rocks. The woman followed without speaking. Beyond the stones, another hidden valley appeared. Unlike the dark forest behind them, this place overflowed with light. Wildflowers covered the hills. Crystal streams crossed bright green grass. Ancient oak trees stretched proudly toward the sky. It felt untouched by war, untouched by time. At the center of the valley stood a single enormous tree unlike anything she had ever seen. Its trunk was wider than a house. Silver leaves shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The white wolf approached the ancient tree with complete reverence. Then it quietly lowered its head. The woman watched in silence. Every instinct told her this place held answers. She stepped closer. As she reached the tree, she noticed countless names carved into the ancient bark.
Kings, queens,
Warriors, guardians. Generations had stood here before her. Near the base of the tree, she discovered one carving that looked newer than the others. It carried only one symbol. The same wolf, the same crown, the same mountain. Before she could understand its meaning, another sound echoed across the valley. Footsteps. Several of them. Slow. Careful. The white wolf immediately stepped beside her. Its calm expression disappeared. Its golden eyes hardened. Figures slowly emerged from between the distant trees. They wore dark cloaks, hiding their faces beneath deep hoods. None carried raised weapons. None rushed forward. They simply watched. One by one, they surrounded the outer edge of the valley, while keeping their distance. The woman counted them.
5.
Then 7. Then 10. More shadows appeared. The valley had been waiting for them. Far away, the Alpha King finally made his own decision. He entered the royal armory, where the weapons of generations rested beneath vaulted stone ceilings. Rows of polished swords reflected torchlight across the walls. At the very end of the chamber stood the sword carried by every ruler before him. He slowly reached for it. Not because he planned to start a war. Because he understood the war had already started without him. He fastened the sword across his back before turning toward the old commander waiting quietly at the entrance. Prepare only those whose loyalty has never been questioned. The commander bowed without hesitation. No horns sounded. No banners were raised. No public announcement was made. The Alpha King intended to move through silence, just as his enemies had. Back inside the hidden valley, the cloaked strangers remained motionless. The woman looked from one face to another, but the deep hoods revealed nothing. The white wolf never stepped away from her side. Its breathing remained steady. Its body formed an unbreakable wall between her and every unknown figure. Then something unexpected happened. The cloaked strangers slowly lowered themselves onto one knee. Not toward the woman. Not toward the wolf. Toward both of them. Confusion filled her eyes. No one spoke. No explanation came. Only silence. Then the oldest among the cloaked figures slowly raised one weathered hand and pointed toward the distant mountains beyond the valley. The woman followed the direction with her eyes. High above the cliffs stood the broken outline of an enormous fortress hidden among the clouds. It had remained invisible until that very moment. The white wolf looked toward the forgotten fortress. Its golden eyes reflected complete certainty. Whatever answers they had been searching for since leaving the palace were no longer hidden inside the forest. They were waiting inside the mountain itself. And someone else had reached that fortress before them. The mountain had been waiting long before the first king claimed the throne. Its towering cliffs rose above the clouds like silent giants guarding secrets forgotten by time. Cold winds circled the ancient fortress, without rest. Broken towers stood against the gray sky while enormous stone walls carried the scars of battles erased from history. Nothing about the place welcomed strangers. Everything warned them to turn back. The woman stood at the foot of the narrow mountain path. Her eyes remained fixed upon the fortress hidden high above the valley. The climb looked impossible. Sharp cliffs surrounded the trail on both sides. Loose stones covered every step. One mistake would send anyone falling into the endless darkness below. The white wolf slowly walked forward. There was no hesitation in its movements. No fear. No uncertainty. It had reached the place it had been searching for since leaving the palace. The cloaked guardians remained behind in complete silence. None attempted to follow. None tried to stop her. They simply watched as the woman and the great wolf disappeared onto the ancient path climbing toward the forgotten fortress. The journey became harder with every step. Cold air grew thinner. Dark clouds gathered overhead. Rain began falling across the mountain in soft, steady drops. The stones became slippery beneath her boots. More than once she nearly lost her balance, but every time the white wolf remained close enough to steady her path. Hours passed before the fortress finally stood before them. Its enormous gates had collapsed centuries ago. Massive wooden beams rested beneath layers of moss and vines. Broken banners still hung from cracked walls where no wind had touched them for generations. Silence ruled everything. The woman slowly crossed the ruined entrance. Inside the fortress, nature had reclaimed what men abandoned long ago. Grass covered the stone courtyard. Small trees grew between broken walls. Crystal rainwater filled cracked fountains once built for kings. Yet beneath the peaceful beauty, another feeling waited. Someone had been here recently. Fresh footprints crossed the wet stone. The white wolf noticed them immediately. Its ears lifted. Its breathing slowed. Its eyes followed every mark across the courtyard. The trail led toward the highest tower standing at the center of the fortress. Meanwhile, far below inside the royal capital, another battle had quietly begun. The Alpha King gathered only his oldest commander and a handful of warriors whose loyalty had never once been questioned. No royal banners flew above them. Their armor carried no shining symbols. They looked less like a royal escort and more like ordinary travelers preparing for a dangerous journey. The old commander finally asked the question every loyal soldier carried inside his heart. "Your Majesty, are we riding toward war?" The Alpha King looked toward the northern mountains. His voice remained calm. "War has already crossed our borders. Now we find the hand guiding it." No one spoke again. Every warrior mounted his horse. The palace gates opened before sunrise. The Alpha King left the capital without ceremony, without applause, without announcing his departure. Only a few trusted guards watched their ruler disappear into the morning mist. Inside the palace, the royal council received the news moments later. At first they celebrated. The Alpha King had left the throne, exactly as they hoped. One young noble laughed openly. "The throne stands empty. Now the kingdom belongs to us." The oldest council member remained silent once again. His eyes slowly turned toward the empty royal chair. Something about the king's decision troubled him. A ruler who panicked always stayed close to power. A ruler who walked away from power usually knew something others did not. That thought refused to leave his mind. Far above the mountains, the woman entered the highest tower. Rain dripped through broken ceilings. Ancient staircases spiraled upward beneath walls covered with faded paintings. Most had become impossible to recognize after centuries of wind and water. Only one remained almost untouched. It showed a great white wolf standing beside an Alpha King. Behind them stood a woman whose face had been carefully preserved by time. The woman looked at the painting in complete silence. Her heartbeat slowly quickened. The face seemed strangely familiar, not because she remembered it, because parts of it reminded her of herself. The same calm eyes, the same dark hair, the same quiet expression. Before she could move closer, another sound echoed through the tower. Footsteps.
Slow.
Confident. Not hers. Not the wolves. Someone else had reached the top before them. The white wolf immediately stepped in front of her. Its deep growl rolled through the empty tower like distant thunder. A tall figure slowly appeared from the darkness above. The stranger wore a long black cloak with a hood pulled low across the face. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the cloak onto the ancient stone floor. The figure stopped only a few steps away. Neither side moved. Neither side attacked. For several long moments, only the sound of falling rain filled the tower. Then the stranger slowly removed the hood. An older man stood before them. His silver hair rested upon broad shoulders. A long scar crossed one side of his face. His eyes settled upon the great white wolf. A quiet smile appeared. Not the smile of an enemy. The smile of someone who had been waiting for many years. His voice carried through the empty tower with calm certainty. "I knew one day the guardian would return." The woman remained frozen. The white wolf lowered its growl but never stepped aside. The old man slowly looked toward her. There was neither surprise nor confusion in his expression, only recognition, as though he had known her long before she ever reached the mountain. Before another word could be spoken, the entire fortress suddenly trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Loose stones crashed somewhere below. The old man's expression changed instantly. He turned toward the highest window overlooking the valley. Far beneath the mountain, dozens of riders had appeared between the trees. Black banners moved beneath the storm. The hidden enemy had finally revealed itself, and they were climbing toward the fortress. The mountain no longer belonged to silence. Black banners climbed the winding trail beneath the fortress like a river of darkness flowing toward its ancient walls. The sound of horses echoed through the valley while heavy boots struck the wet stone with growing confidence. Rain continued falling, but no storm could hide the truth any longer. The enemy had arrived. The old guardian remained at the broken window for only a heartbeat before turning back toward the woman and the great white wolf. His calm expression never disappeared. Fear had left him many years ago. He slowly walked toward the center of the tower, where an enormous stone table rested beneath layers of dust. Ancient maps had been carved directly into its surface. Rivers, mountains, forgotten roads, hidden passages. Every line had survived centuries. His hand rested upon one narrow path beneath the mountain. His quiet voice filled the tower. The fortress was never built to defeat armies. It was built to outlast them. The woman stepped closer. For the first time since leaving the palace, she felt that every mystery had been leading toward this moment. The white wolf watched the old guardian carefully. Its golden eyes showed complete trust. That alone answered one important question. This man was not an enemy. Far below the fortress, the riders finally reached the outer walls. Their leader slowly removed his helmet. A long scar crossed his jaw. His cold eyes studied every broken tower before lifting toward the highest window. He knew someone was watching. A cruel smile appeared across his face. Years of planning had brought him here. The woman had to be captured. The wolf had to be separated from her. The Alpha King had to be broken before the kingdom could fall. Everything depended upon this single mountain. Inside the palace, the royal council believed victory stood only hours away. Messengers brought reports that the Alpha King had vanished into the north with only a handful of loyal warriors. The younger nobles celebrated openly. Wine filled golden cups. Laughter echoed through private chambers. One noble proudly declared that by sunset the throne would belong to new hands. Only the oldest council member refused to celebrate. He quietly walked toward the empty throne room. The vast chamber felt colder than ever before. He stopped before the throne and slowly looked around. Every battle flag, every carved pillar, every stone reminded him of one truth. The Alpha King had never once made a careless decision. If he had left the capital unguarded then, he had already accepted the risk, which meant he expected something greater than a political rebellion. That realization sent a chill through his body. Meanwhile, the Alpha King rode across the northern wilderness without slowing. Rain covered his dark cloak. Mud splashed beneath the hooves of his horse. The small group behind him never complained. Every rider understood that speed now mattered more than comfort. The old commander finally looked toward the distant mountains. Smoke rose between the cliffs. Not from villages. From signal fires. The Alpha King saw them as well. His silver eyes narrowed. The hidden enemy had stopped hiding. That meant the final move had begun. Without speaking, he urged his horse forward. The distance between him and the fortress grew smaller with every passing mile. High above, inside the ancient fortress, the old guardian led the woman through narrow stone corridors untouched by sunlight for generations. Dust covered every step. Old banners rested against cracked walls. Massive wooden doors stood open as though someone had left only moments before. The deeper they walked, the stranger the fortress became. It was not abandoned. It was waiting. Finally, they reached a circular chamber beneath the highest tower. The room contained no treasure, no royal furniture, only a single stone pedestal standing beneath an opening where pale daylight poured from above. Upon the pedestal rested an ancient silver crest shaped like a wolf. Its surface glowed softly despite the darkness surrounding it. The woman stopped without realizing it. Something inside her stirred. Not memory, recognition. The old guardian quietly looked toward her. For years I believed this moment would never come. His words carried no excitement, only relief. The white wolf slowly approached the pedestal. It lowered its head before the ancient crest exactly as it had before the great tree in the hidden valley. The old guardian smiled faintly. Even after generations, the bond remains unbroken. Before the woman could ask another question, the entire chamber shook violently. The sound of heavy stone crashing echoed through the fortress. Dust filled the air. The enemy had reached the outer gate. One young guardian rushed into the chamber, breathing heavily. They have entered the lower walls. The old guardian remained perfectly calm. Close the inner passage. Delay them. Nothing more. The young guardian immediately disappeared. The woman looked toward the old man. You are not afraid. He gently shook his head. Fear belongs to those who believe today decides everything. This mountain has survived hundreds of years. It can survive one more battle. Outside the fortress, the black armored warriors poured through broken gateways like a dark tide. Some climbed shattered stairways. Others spread through abandoned courtyards, searching every ruined hall. Their leader never hurried. His confidence came from preparation. He believed every escape had already been blocked. Every path had already been studied. Every outcome already belonged to him. He was wrong. Deep beneath the fortress, hidden behind a wall of ancient stone, another passage slowly opened. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. The old guardian turned toward the woman. There is only one road left. The white wolf stepped into the passage first. Without hesitation, it disappeared into the shadows. The woman followed. The old guardian remained behind. His eyes lifted toward the ceiling where distant footsteps echoed through the fortress. He understood exactly what must happen. Some doors could only be protected by sacrifice. Far below the mountain, the Alpha King finally reached the valley leading toward the fortress. His horse suddenly stopped. The great ruler slowly looked upward. Rain drifted across the towering cliffs. Far above, among the broken walls, he saw black banners flying where no banners should exist. His enemies had arrived before him. For only a single heartbeat, his face remained perfectly still. Then every trace of restraint disappeared. The calm ruler, who had spent years mastering patience, now rode forward with unstoppable purpose. The battle was no longer about a throne. It was no longer about politics. It was no longer about proving his strength. It was about protecting the one person his wolf had chosen long before he understood why. And somewhere beneath the ancient fortress, hidden beneath layers of stone and history, the woman was unknowingly walking toward the greatest secret the Wolf Kingdom had protected for centuries. The mountain shook as though it had awakened from 1,000 years of silence. Massive stones crashed from the cliffs while dark clouds rolled across the sky. Thunder echoed through every valley. Rain poured over the ancient fortress, washing away dust that had rested upon its walls for centuries. What had once been a forgotten ruin had become the center of a battle that would decide the future of the Wolf Kingdom. Deep beneath the fortress, the woman followed the great white wolf through a narrow passage carved into the heart of the mountain. A cold air drifted through the ancient tunnel. Crystal water flowed quietly beside the stone path, reflecting pale light across the walls. Strange carvings covered every surface. Wolves stood beside kings. Kings stood beside ordinary people. None ruled alone. Every image carried the same message. True strength had never belonged to one throne. It had always belonged to those who protected others. The woman slowly reached out and touched one of the carvings. The stone felt warm beneath her fingertips. Not because of fire, because generations had believed in what it represented. The white wolf paused before an enormous circular door hidden within the mountain. Unlike every ruin above, this doorway remained untouched by time. Its silver markings still shone beneath the dim light. The wolf stepped forward. It gently placed one powerful paw against the center of the ancient seal. A deep sound rolled through the mountain. The stone door slowly began to move. Dust filled the air. Ancient gears hidden inside the mountain turned for the first time in centuries. The passage opened. Beyond it waited a chamber unlike anything the woman had ever imagined. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above. Hundreds of crystal pillars surrounded a peaceful underground lake whose surface reflected every beam of light like polished glass. At the center of the lake stood a small island connected by a narrow stone bridge. Upon that island rested a single throne, not made of gold, not covered with jewels. It had been carved entirely from white stone. Simple, powerful, timeless. Behind the throne stood the statue of an enormous wolf watching over everything inside the chamber. The woman slowly crossed the bridge. Every step echoed through the silent cavern. She felt no fear, only an overwhelming sense that she had reached the end of a journey that had begun long before she was born. Meanwhile, above the mountain, chaos spread across the fortress. The black armored invaders searched every corridor with growing frustration. Hidden passages confused them. Ancient stairways led nowhere. Rooms appeared empty despite signs that someone had recently passed through them. Their leader stood inside the main courtyard, studying the broken fortress with narrowed eyes. His confidence slowly faded. Someone understood this place better than he did. That realization made him dangerous. He ordered his warriors to spread through every remaining tower. No corner would remain unchecked. Far below the mountain, another force finally entered the valley. The Alpha King. His horse raced across the rain-soaked ground while loyal warriors followed close behind. Water streamed from his black cloak. His silver eyes never left the fortress standing above the cliffs. He saw smoke rising from the upper walls. He saw enemy banners flying where only silence should have remained. He needed no messenger. The battle had already begun. Without slowing, he led his warriors toward the narrow mountain path. Every rider understood there would be no retreat. Inside the hidden chamber, the woman reached the white stone throne. She expected treasure, ancient weapons, forgotten crowns. Instead, she found something completely different. A single wooden chest rested quietly upon the seat. Nothing more. Its surface carried the same wolf symbol that had guided her throughout the entire journey. She slowly lifted the lid. Inside lay an old leather journal wrapped carefully inside faded cloth. Its pages had yellowed with age but remained perfectly preserved. The first page carried only one sentence. Power without loyalty destroys kingdoms. Loyalty without power saves them. Her hands trembled slightly. She continued reading. The journal told the story of the first Alpha King, not as history remembered him, but as he truly lived. He had not built the kingdom through fear. He had united scattered clans by protecting the weakest among them. The great white wolves had never chosen rulers because of strength. They chose those willing to sacrifice power for others. Only then did true power become worthy. Every page shattered another belief the kingdoms had carried for generations. Above the chamber, a distant explosion echoed through the mountain. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The enemy was getting closer. At that same moment, the Alpha King reached the outer fortress. He dismounted before the broken gate. Rain fell harder than ever. His warriors waited silently behind him. The enemy commander stepped forward, surrounded by dozens of black armored soldiers. For a long moment, both leaders simply looked at one another. Years of rivalry stood between them. Neither needed introductions. The enemy smiled with cold confidence. He believed numbers guaranteed victory. The Alpha King remained completely calm. His silence carried greater weight than any threat. The wind swept across the ruined courtyard. Black banners snapped violently above broken towers. Every warrior waited for the first command. Instead of drawing his sword immediately, the Alpha King looked beyond the enemy toward the ancient fortress itself. He finally understood why his wolf had walked away from the palace. The wolf had never abandoned him. It had protected the truth that his enemies could never be allowed to possess. The throne inside the palace ruled a kingdom. The secret beneath this mountain protected its soul. The Alpha King slowly placed one hand upon the hilt of his sword. His loyal warriors did the same. Across the courtyard, the enemy raised his weapon. Thunder exploded above the mountain. The first lightning strike illuminated both armies. Then everything became still. One heartbeat, one breath, one final moment before destiny chose its ruler. And deep beneath the fortress, the woman turned another page of the ancient journal, only to discover a hidden map, revealing one final secret that would forever change the fate of the Alpha King and everyone who had sworn loyalty to the Wolf Kingdom. The storm finally reached its highest fury. Thunder shook every stone of the ancient fortress. Rain poured from the dark sky, like the mountain itself was washing away centuries of lies. The battlefield below had become a sea of broken banners and fallen weapons. Every warrior understood that only one truth would survive this day. The future of the Wolf Kingdom would be decided before the sun returned. The Alpha King stepped deeper into the hidden chamber beneath the mountain. His footsteps echoed through the ancient hall where generations of forgotten rulers had once stood. The woman waited beside the white stone throne while the great wolf stood quietly between them. Its golden eyes carried no fear. They carried certainty. The journey that had begun the day she walked away from the palace had finally reached its true destination. The defeated enemy leader slowly rose from the cold stone floor. His pride had been broken, but hatred still burned inside him. He looked around the chamber, searching for another chance to destroy everything he could not possess. His eyes stopped upon the ancient journal resting inside the wooden chest. In one desperate movement, he rushed toward it, believing that if the truth disappeared, then the kingdom would remain trapped inside darkness forever. Before he could touch the journal, the white wolf moved. It crossed the chamber with breathtaking speed. It stood between the enemy and the ancient truth. A deep growl filled the hall. It was not the roar of anger. It was the warning of a guardian who had protected this place for countless generations. The enemy froze where he stood. For the first time since entering the fortress, fear replaced his arrogance. He realized he had never been fighting a single king. He had been fighting the living spirit of an entire kingdom. The Alpha King slowly walked forward. His sword remained lowered. He no longer needed to prove his strength. His enemies had already seen it. His people had already believed it. He looked into the defeated man's eyes and understood something that had taken him years to learn. Fear could force obedience for a season. Loyalty could protect a kingdom forever. The enemy dropped to his knees. His sword slipped from his trembling hands and echoed across the stone floor. The battle inside him ended long before the battle outside. He had chased power his entire life, but he had never understood the price of earning trust. In that single moment, he lost everything because nothing around him remained loyal. The Alpha King picked up the ancient journal and opened its final page. A single message waited there. The greatest alpha is never the one who stands above everyone else. The greatest alpha is the one whose people refuse to leave his side. Silence filled the chamber. The king slowly closed the journal and looked toward the woman. Their eyes met without a single word. She had once believed her path ended beyond the palace gates. He had believed letting her leave was the only sacrifice a ruler could make. Both had been wrong. Destiny had been leading them toward each other through every choice they made. The white wolf quietly walked away from the throne. It crossed the chamber and stopped beside the Alpha King. Then it gently rested its head against his shoulder exactly as it had done years before when the world was still simple. Nothing had been broken between them. The bond had only become stronger. The woman smiled softly. Now she finally understood. The wolf had never chosen between them. It had protected both of them until they were ready to understand the truth. Far above the chamber, the sounds of battle slowly disappeared. One after another, enemy warriors threw down their weapons. The loyal soldiers of the Wolf Kingdom stood victorious across the ancient fortress. The black banners that had climbed the mountain with pride now lay soaked beneath the rain. Their rebellion had ended not because they were weaker in numbers, but because they had fought without loyalty, while the Alpha King's warriors fought for something greater than themselves. Days later, the gates of the royal capital opened once again. Thousands of people filled the streets before sunrise. Old men stood beside young children. Farmers stood beside warriors. Mothers lifted their children onto their shoulders so they could see the king return. No one had been ordered to gather. No one had been forced to cheer. They came because they wanted to. The Alpha King entered the city without wearing his crown. The woman walked beside him dressed as simply as she had the day she first arrived at the palace. The great white wolf walked proudly between them. Every person watching understood something had changed forever. This was no longer a kingdom ruled by fear. This was a kingdom united by trust. The royal council faced judgment before the entire kingdom. Every hidden letter, every secret alliance, every betrayal became known. Those who had tried to divide the kingdom watched their own lies destroy everything they had built. Justice arrived quietly but completely. No revenge was needed because the truth proved stronger than any punishment. As evening covered the capital, the Alpha King climbed to the highest balcony overlooking his kingdom. The mountains stretched across the horizon beneath golden light. Rivers reflected the colors of the setting sun. Villages glowed peacefully in the distance. For the first time in many years, the land looked exactly as it should.
Alive.
Safe. Whole. The woman joined him, without speaking. The white wolf sat between them, watching the endless forests where their journey had begun. A gentle wind carried the scent of pine trees across the palace walls. The Alpha King smiled for the first time without hiding it. He had conquered armies. He had defeated betrayal. He had protected his kingdom. Yet his greatest victory had not been winning a war. It had been earning a loyalty that could never be commanded. As darkness covered the kingdom, stars slowly appeared above the mountains. Their light reflected in the wolf's golden eyes. The ancient prophecy had fulfilled itself exactly as it was always meant to. The throne remained where it had always stood. The kingdom remained stronger than ever. The people remained united. And from that night forward, every child born in the Wolf Kingdom grew up hearing the same unforgettable story. The strongest Alpha King was never the one who ruled with fear. The strongest Alpha King was the one whose wolf never had to choose because his heart had already chosen what truly mattered. The legend lived on long after the battle ended, and the name of the Alpha King became more than the title of a ruler. It became the symbol of loyalty, courage, sacrifice, and a kingdom that no enemy would ever break again.